Tonight, brace yourselves. We re-diving headfirst into the life of a warrior girl who doesn't wear a crown and isn't some bedtime legend. She's the thunder in the north wind and the grin behind every battle axe. Not a princess, not a fairy tale. She's a northern warbird whose name echoes in the howls of the fjords. So, if you're here for bedtime stories, turn around. This is a saga that snarls back. Gather around, folks, because you're about to meet someone who lived by the crackle of the hearth and the sting of steel. A tale of a girl who didn't ask to be born in winter, but arrived anyway, screaming challenges at the snow and biting cold. Let us see who is joining me tonight. Drop a comment with your city and what hour the moon is riding high, and hit that button to subscribe only if you're truly in for this wild ride. Now, switch off those overhead lights. Let the shadows play across your walls. Maybe flick on a small fan for that low hum that reminds you of distant thunder. We are going back to a world built from raw sinew and blood, where the air is thick with smoke and stories, and destiny waits in the frost. Imagine the biting wind howls down a narrow valley where a lone timber hall squats like a dragon's den. Inside, a fire flickers low. The midwife is already deep in honey brew, swaying slightly as she wipes her hands on a scrap of linen that has seen too many winters. Your mother groans on a stack of wool cloaks that smell of wet dog and last year mold, gripping a wooden ladle like it's a sacred spear. You don't enter this world with a whimper. You arrive howling, voice as sharp as the northern wind. The midwife jumps, sloshing her honey brew on her apron. Your father, who's boasted of battling 2 sea monsters and 1 half-troll, though who can say if the troll was real, squints at your fierce little face and grumbles, "This one's going to make life interesting." The others in the hall nod solemnly, like they're agreeing to a prophecy. Being born a girl here is a gamble bigger than any raid. Most of your sisters were already promised to husbands before they could walk. But you, there's something about the fire in your eyes that makes people hush. Maybe you'll be another lost bride. Or maybe, if you hurry cunning and a bit mad, you will carve out your own fate as a shield bearer of the north. Your cradle isn't some fancy crib. It's a cracked sheep trough, barely scrubbed clean. Inside, you've got a ragged scrap of wool for comfort, a small carved bear for company, and a spider named Griselda, who's claimed the corner and isn't moving for anyone. No lullabies here, no soft songs, just the low snores of your uncles and the occasional rasp of a steel on a whetstone in the corner as a cousin sharpens a blade by firelight. Every few minutes, a rangy dog comes by and sniffs at your brow, tongue lolling. This is as close as you'll get to a cradle guard. Forget fancy baby monitors. This is the North's version of a night watch. You've got 2 older brothers who already smell like smoke and blood, a grandmother who speaks to the empty corners of the room as if they were crowded with ghosts, and an aunt who's buried 3 husbands under suspiciously similar circumstances. You re the 4th girl born this season, but you re the only one who didn't come out screaming. You glared at the world as if it had personally wronged you. Your name is chosen by the elders after much squabbling. It's half based on how loudly you entered the world, half on some dusty old name no one's used in a while, like Jorfrida or Sigwin, names that promise nothing short of chaos. The first night of your life is a battle, the fire guttering low. the icy drafts sneaking through the cracks in the walls. And yet, you refuse to cry. You cling to life with the same stubbornness your kin have for surviving the winter. By dawn, the milk's warm enough. The lice are already hopping from head to head, and you're still glaring at the world like it owes you an explanation. The elders call you the loud one. By the end of the week, someone carves you a small wooden blade for teething, but you don't chew it. You grip it like it's a promise. At 2 years old, your feet already find trouble as easily as the dogs find scraps. You're learning to waddle and weave, turning every doorway into a test of your balance and cunning. Your first true weapon, a gnawed sheep bone that you wave around like a wand of destiny. Childhood here isn't gentle. There are no plush toys or padded corners. What you get is what doesn't end up in the stew pot. Your most beloved toy is a carved horse missing a leg and a nose, bitten off by 3 different cousins. You've also got a pig bladder ball that doubles as a headrest when you redone chasing the chickens. Your kingdom is the muddy yard outside the hall, where pigs root, geese hiss, and your imagination runs as wild as the river in spring thaw. Everything's a challenge, sharp, splintery, and likely to end in tears or laughter, or both. Games here aren't about winning, they're about surviving. Catch the chicken ends in a flurry of feathers and bruises. Throw the rock ends when someone can't dodge fast enough. Sneak the neighbor's firewood is an art form, part heist, part neighborly insult. But your absolute favorite? Ambush your cousin, a game of pure chaos, where you hide behind barrels or slip under benches until you've tackled them into the dirt. It only ends when someone's wailing and an elder thunders, "By Thor's teeth, not again." You learn early the golden rules of the clan. Share your food, but only after you've licked it first. Never touch someone's comb, ever, and always offer the chieftain's hound the first taste of your dinner, or it'll take it anyway, along with a few of your fingers for good measure. Formal lessons? No such thing. Your schooling is done in the smoky shadows of the hall, through chores and the sideways glances of adults who only have time for survival. You see your mother grinding grain with a patience that is as steady as the turning of the seasons. You watch your father oil his axe while cursing the chieftain's taxes, paid in fish, of all things. Your older siblings practice wrestling goats in the yard. You join in once, only to discover that goats are stubborn and headbutt harder than any human cousin. By the time you're 4, you know how to spark a flame from flint, skin a rabbit clean, and recognize the weather just by how the goats shift and the chickens fuss. You've also perfected the art of snatching honey cakes from the larder, though you re-caught as often as not. Each scolding is another notch in your growing collection of scars and stories. Some children are quiet, content to watch and learn. Your noise and motion incarnate, always climbing, poking, testing the edges of the world. Dirt clings to your hair like it's a crown. Blood smudges your tunic from scraped knees and elbows. And there's a gleam in your eyes that says, you're only just getting started. Your grandmother pats your head with gnarled hands, eyes bright. "She's got that glint," she says, half to herself, half to the ghosts she keeps for company. The glint of someone who'll grow up to send men running for the hills. You're too young to understand, but you love how the words feel, like a prophecy waiting in the dark. At 5, you know 2 truths. Fire is life, and everything else is cold and loud. Forget reading circles or gentle rhymes. Your education is a daily gauntlet of chores and scrapes. If something's steaming, don't touch it. If it's frozen, don't lick it. If it looks innocent, it's probably plotting your downfall. School doesn't exist here, not in the way travelers speak of in distant lands. Your lessons come from repetition and hard stares, from the weight of iron in your hand and the chill of water up to your knees. Math, that's counting the sheep each night to be sure none wandered off. Counting spoons to make sure the younger ones didn't pocket them for mischief. Lose either, and you'll learn consequences faster than any tutor could teach. Reading? A few runes carved in old stones outside the hall. Your father points to them, says, "That one's death." You nod solemnly and commit it to memory. No need to ask twice. Your words come quick and dirty, most of them about fighting, bleeding, or running. Your mother shows you how to grind the grain fine without nicking your fingers. Your father teaches you to hold a blade steady, how to look a man in the eye without flinching. Your uncle shows you how to gut a fish with a flick of the wrist. Your aunt, in her gravel-voiced way, teaches you how to gut a man, though, she says with a wink, it's only theoretical for now. No one bothers with baby talk here. Adults speak in the same voices they used to call the hounds or curse the weather. You either learn or you're left behind. No pity, no waiting. Songs, yes, but they are blood-soaked epics of feuds and fury, ballads of warriors whose ribs were pulled from their backs like harp strings. You hum them while you stir the cauldron or chase the goats, soothed by the music of battle in your veins. By 6, you're a storm in miniature, sharp as a newly honed blade, quick as a cat. You've learned to read the wind by how the chickens fuss, to throw a stone so it smacks true, to lie so smoothly that even the hounds pause to sniff out the truth. You're not being coddled. You're being forged, hammered into something that can stand against winter as bite and the laughter of the gods. Your elders watch you, not with gentle smiles, but with small nods of satisfaction when you get something right. No clapping, no cheering, just a grunt of approval and a chance to do it again. This time, faster. This time, sharper. You're not some child in the modern sense. You're a half-grown warrior already, just waiting for the day you're strong enough to wield the blade that calls your name. And when the first bloom of adolescence comes, like a storm cloud rolling in from the fjord, it doesn't ask your permission. You wake up one morning taller, sharper edged, and with a fierce confusion that buzzes under your skin. Your voice doesn't crack, but your insults cut deeper. Your face shines with oil. Your sweat stinks like old cheese, and there's a new fire in your belly that wants to shout at the sky. Brace yourselves, because tonight we were venturing into the raw and ridiculous world of Viking adolescence, where your body starts misbehaving and your ambitions run hotter than the forge. No one RS handing out polite pamphlets or warm advice here, just a sharp learning curve and a wooden spoon to the back of the head if you read too slow. Your story takes a turn the day the first blood comes. There's no gentle talk, no sisterly chat about changes. Your mother barely glances up from the skinning a rabbit, tosses you a scrap of rough wool, and grunts, "Handle it." And you do, because in this place, there's no room for squeamishness or soft edges. The world doesn't pause because you're bleeding. It barely blinks. Your chores don't care either. They're as relentless as winter's bite. You keep hauling water in buckets that bite into your shoulders, chopping wood that never seems to run out, and cleaning fish so fresh they're still twitching. Oh, and let us not forget wrestling with goats, those head-butting menaces who look at you like you owe them rent. You do it all, but now with an ache in your back and a growing desire to stick a blade in something, anything. They tell you it's normal. You're not sure if they're talking about the blood or the rage. Training doesn't stop. It just sharpens. Gone are the days of wooden sticks. Now it's real blades in your hands. Still dull, because apparently they'd prefer not to have to dig your corpse out of the snow just yet. You're taught to swing harder, move faster, and never show tears unless they're from real pain or real triumph. You fight the boys. No special treatment. When you win, they say don't brag. But you do, of course, just not out loud. You whisper your victories to the goats in the yard. They're your secret audience, your loyal fans. Socially, everything's getting weirder. Some of the girls start braiding their hair with flowers and tossing shy smiles at the boys. You're not here for that. You braid your hair tight. No frills, no fuss. So it won't block your eyes when the practice blades swing your way. When a boy tries to flirt, you ask if he's willing to spar instead. Most step back. A few try. Fewer try again. Evenings are simple. Cleaning weapons, slurping stew, and ignoring the whispers of marriage and matchmaking. Those are dreams for other girls. Your dreams are wilder. Standing shoulder to shoulder in a shield wall, sweat freezing in the winter air, and no one daring to ask if you're strong enough. You're not there yet, but you're close. Close enough that when you catch your reflection in the blacksmith's battered shield, eyes glinting like river ice, hair wild and streaked with sweat, you don't see a girl anymore. You see a threat. 12 winters mark your birth. A dozen cycles of snow and struggle. 12 years old here doesn't mean candles and cakes. It means you're old enough to ruin your own life with steel. On the morning of your birth anniversary, your father hands you a bundle wrapped in stiff, oiled cloth. You half expect it to be something dull, a broom maybe, or some dried out bread crust. Instead, you find an axe, iron forged, leather bound, and glinting in the firelight like a promise you were not sure you were ready to keep. You name it immediately, not because you're sentimental, but because if you treat it like a friend, you might fear it a little less. You give it a name worthy of saga songs, like Bone Chewer or Crow Friend, or maybe something completely absurd, like Mittens, because sometimes the scariest things have the gentlest names. Outside, the first swing is a disaster. You miss the log entirely, the blade humming past wood and into open air, nearly taking out the fence instead. The second swing is worse. It finds your foot. You don't cry. You just sit there, blood soaking your boot, wondering if this is what they mean by a rite of passage, or just a really bad idea. Your uncle finds you there, bleeding and stoic, and he laughs, calls it your first lesson. He patches your foot and offers you a pig's ear as consolation. You decline with as much dignity as you can muster. The next weeks are a blur of bruises and splinters. Your training ground is a patch of churned up earth behind the hall. Logs for practice, straw dummies that tilt drunkenly after every missed strike. Your aim is terrible. Your foot still aches, but you don't stop. Blisters bloom on your palms, turn raw, then harden into the calluses of someone who means business. Sometimes you train alone, the cold wind your only witness. Sometimes you're paired with your cousin, 2 winters older and fond of spinning in circles before every swing like he performing for the ancestors. You roll your eyes and block his wild strikes anyway. One day, everything clicks. He lunges, confident, careless. You parry low, counter high, and crack the wooden blade into his ribs. He drops his weapon with a grunt, eyes wide as if he's glimpsed the northern lights for the first time. That night, you lay your axe beside your sleeping mat, not for tradition's sake, not because of some silly superstition, because you know if someone comes through that door in the dark, you'll be ready. It's not just about learning to fight anymore. It's about learning that fighting is what you were born for. Trouble, of course, has a way of finding you. It starts with a boy. Always does, doesn't it? You're at training, mud caked on your boots, axe in hand, minding your own business. When this boy, taller than you, a grin too wide for his face, saunters over. He's just finished knocking another boy into the dirt, and clearly thinks he's a legend. He looks at you and smirks. Sure you want to fight? He drawls. Might break a nail. You don't answer. You just step forward, nod to the instructor, and set your feet. His friends are already snickering. Someone mutters, "Go easy on her." You don't go easy on anyone. Your first strike is blocked. Your second grazes his shoulder, enough to make him blink. Your third lands square in the center of his chest. He lets out a noise like a startled goose and stumbles backward, eyes wide with shock. He recovers, swings at you, wild and sloppy. You duck, sweep his legs, and send him sprawling into the mud. It feels as natural as breathing, like your body's known how to do this all along. For a moment, the world stills. The boys whooped a second ago fall silent. The goats in the yard even seem to pause, ears pricked. You plant your foot on his chest, just enough pressure to remind him who won. Then you step back, toss your braid over your shoulder like a war banner, and walk away without a word. The boy doesn't say much either. He sits there, blinking up at the clouds, coughing on pride. Later, he limps off to nurse his bruises, his eyes following you, like he's not sure if he wants revenge or respect. That night, one of the elders pulls you aside. You brace for the usual lecture. Act like a lady, or don't show off. Instead, they just grunt and say, "Good footwork." That's all. But you feel it like a badge of honor. Your mother gives you a nod. Your father? He doesn't say a word, just lifts an eyebrow and hands you the largest chunk of dried fish at dinner. In this clan, that's as good as a standing ovation. The boy avoids your gaze for a week. When he finally meets your eyes again, it's with the wary respect you to give to a wolf that's let you live. This time, you learn something vital in that moment. You don't have to be loud to make an impression. You don't have to flirt or flatter to earn respect. And you definitely don't have to apologize for someone else's wounded ego. Victory doesn't need words. It smells like sweat and iron. It tastes like the salt of your own skin. And it feels like the world just got a little bit bigger. Like maybe their ass room for a girl who doesn't tut back down. This is Viking adolescence. And you're only getting started. Let's talk about sweat, dirt, and the potent perfume of slightly overcooked stew. A scent that will cling to your soul long after the fighting is done. Forget any illusions of magical ceremonies or thunderstruck epiphanies. There's no shining prophecy scrawled in runes, no grand speech from the gods, just a cracked shield a bloodied lip, and an old warhound of a man grunting, "She's ready." The last few years have been an endless grind of blood, sweat, and stubbornness. You've earned every bruise like a family heirloom, each one a lesson in just how much you're willing to take. Mornings start with the clang of practice weapons and the icy sting of breath in your lungs. Nights end with an ache in every muscle, as if the earth itself is trying to pull you back down. You've become an expert in pain. There's the deep, steady throb of a sprain, the sharp burn of a fresh bruise, the electric jolt of a cut, and the lingering sting of an ego still smarting from your grandmother's wrestling hold. She's older than the hills, but faster than you'll ever admit. Your braids grown longer, practical, not pretty. You wrap it tight so it won't snag in the chaos of a melee. Or worse, give some half-wit an easy handhold. Some girls braid in beads of bone or threads of color. You knot in bits of leather and small animal teeth. No, not your own, though you're sure your enemies would be impressed if they were. Training's shifted gears. It's no longer about how hard you can swing an axe, but how well you can keep your head when someone fast trying to part it from your shoulders. You spar with anyone who steps forward. Big men with shoulders like oxen and grim faces that know how to smile. No one holds back, and that's exactly how you want it. Hesitation is a luxury you can't afford. It's not just pain that hesitation costs, it's respect. Your shield arms become stronger than the one you favor, permanently wrapped in rawhide and scabs. Every match is a dance of risk. Sometimes you win, sometimes you're flat on your back with stars in your eyes. But you always stand up. Always. That's what earns you their nods of approval. One afternoon, you're sparring against a warrior twice your size. The sun is relentless, sweat stinging your eyes. You block, pivot, but his strike lands clean, right down the middle of your shield. It splits in two, like an overripe melon, splinters flying as your defense shatters. For a heartbeat, there's silence. Then you drop what's left of the shield, snarl, and go at him barehanded. You lose, of course. He's got the reach, the weight. But no one forgets the sight of you, wild-eyed and bleeding, still refusing to back down. That's the day the elders start saying your name differently. Not like a child who needs correcting, but like a fighter they can count on. No one says the word Shieldmaiden, but they don't glance sideways anymore when you stand in the shield wall. The braid, the blood, the bruises, they've become your banner. You're not just another girl anymore. You're the one they watch when the world tips sideways. And then it happens. Your first raid. You finally make it onto a longship. From the shore, it looks like freedom. Sleek lines, carved dragon's head, a promise of new horizons. But within an hour, you're questioning every life decision you've ever made. The deck is slick with sea spray. The wind claws at your hair like an angry cat, and the rowing bench is a torture device disguised as a seat. You're wedged in elbow to elbow with warriors who smell like old leather, sweat, and the sort of optimism that probably died days ago. Personal space is a myth. Shift left, your knee smacks an axe. Shift right, someone sneezes directly into your hair. Above you, a seagull shrieks as if mocking your choices. Rowing is a punishment disguised as progress. Your hands blister before the sun's even at its peak. By midday, your blisters have blisters. Your palms feel like they've been grated over hot coals. But they tell you this means you're doing it right. There's no pause, no gentle break, only the rhythm of the oars, the taste of salt on your lips, and the quiet promise of something worth all this pain. The meals are an insult to the very idea of food. Dried fish so old it tastes like regret, hard bread that could double as a throwing weapon, and water that's technically drinkable if you're feeling charitable. You chew with the grim determination of a warrior chewing through destiny itself. At night, you curl against the side of the ship, your shield for a blanket, and your axe for a pillow. The ship rocks you like a lullaby, but the snoring of the crew is more cacophony than comfort. You lie there, half dozing, half wondering if the ancestors are laughing at you, because surely this is someone's idea of a cosmic joke. Yet even in the cold, the damp, and the endless ache of your arms, there's something else, a flicker of wild joy, the open sea, the shared struggle, the way your crew grunts and curses and laughs together. You're part of it. You've earned your place. You're not just tagging along. You are not a girl to be patted on the head and told to stay by the fire. You're a warrior, and warriors row until the horizon bleeds gold. The coastline finally appears, dark and distant, a thin line against the sky. Your arms feel like molten lead. Your legs have forgotten how to bend. Your stomach is a churning knot of nerves and too much sea air. But your heart beats like a war drum. You're hungry, sore, seasick, and so ready you could scream. Because this ship isn't just transport, it's a forge. And the moment you set foot on that shore, you'll be tempered by it. The land grows clearer, a quiet village nestled against the cold earth, thatched roofs crouching under the weight of another winter. Smoke curls lazily from chimneys, and you wonder if there's a baker in there, maybe a blacksmith, maybe some goats. Those goats always seem to show up. You're going to destroy it. The ship hits the shore with a jolt that rattles your teeth. Your stomach drops, not from guilt, but from the electric surge of panic. This is it. No practice swings, no wooden blades, real steel, real blood, real consequences. You jump off the ship, your boots sinking into the soft sand. It's more treacherous than you expected, and you nearly twist your ankle before you even see your first foe. Battle cries ring out, primal and unpolished. Yours bursts out of your chest like a battle horn, except it sounds more like a goat choking on a turnip. You'll get better, probably. Your first opponent is not some fierce warrior. It's a chicken. The damned thing comes at you flapping, feathers ruffled like it's ready to claim your soul. You step sideways, nearly tripping, and it scuttles past you like it has better places to be. Then, finally, your real fight. A man, taller than you by a head, eyes wide with shock at the sight of a girl charging in with fire in her veins and an axe in her hand. Your blood roars in your ears. You don't think, just move. He swings first. You block, barely. Your shield rattles. Your shoulders scream. You retaliate. A low swipe meant to cut the air from his lungs. He staggers back, and for a heartbeat, you see the glint of uncertainty in his eyes. He hesitates. You don't. Your axe cracks against his side, the thud of iron on leather, and he folds. Around you, chaos reigns. Screams, curses, the ring of steel. But you're focused on this moment, this man who thought you'd be an easy target. You don't feel fear. You feel alive. Later, you'll barely remember the details. The taste of blood on your lips, the raw ache in your shoulder, the way your braid kept slapping against your cheek with every strike. But you'll remember this, the way the earth seemed to hold its breath the instant before you struck, the way the man's eyes changed from confidence to disbelief to something almost like respect. The battle isn't over, it's just begun. You fight until your muscles burn, until the only thing you taste is the cold air and the iron tang of victory. You fight because you're here to prove something, not to them, but to yourself. No one says the words Shieldmaiden yet, but as you look around at the smoking village, the warriors you stand beside, and the stunned expressions of those who thought you break, you know you were carving out your own legend, one heartbeat at a time. This is your beginning, and it's only going to get wilder from here. Picture this. You're standing in the middle of a raid, adrenaline thumping in your veins, the air thick with the scent of smoke and fear, and you re-chasing a villager armed with nothing but a pitchfork. He drops it the moment you lock eyes, feet slapping against the dirt as he flees with a single-minded focus of someone who had enough of this nonsense. You give chase for a few steps, grinning like a wolf. Then you remember, you're not here for the chase. You're here to loot. So you pivot, duck through a low doorway, and find yourself face to face with your prize. A storehouse packed to the rafters with cheese. More cheese than you've ever seen. Hard rounds, soft lumps, wheels the size of your shield. You grab one, because you can. It's heavy, but it feels like a trophy. Outside, chaos reigns supreme. Voices shout, axes thud into doors. Someone trips over a bucket and curses the gods. Another warrior, who has clearly been at the mead a bit too long, breaks into song that has no tune and even less sense. A battle brother next to you shouts a prayer to the All-Father, only to immediately fall backward into a well with a mighty splash that drowns out the chaos for a moment. Yes, in that instant, you realize that Viking raids are not the noble epics sung by bards. They were glorious, messy, confusing bedlam, feared for their fury, yes, but probably also for their sheer absurdity. Eventually, the screaming fades. The resistance flickers out like the last embers of a dying fire. The village is subdued, pacified, in the polite words of the elders. But in truth, it's been stripped bare and left smoldering. Your crew gathers what's worth taking. Silver trinkets, iron tools, squealing livestock, and for reasons known only to him, a very fine wooden stool that one warrior cradles like a newborn. You limp back to the longship, your shin throbbing from an enthusiastic goat's last stand. You've got a stolen spoon tucked into your belt, a battered boot caked in mud, and half a wheel of cheese that you cradle like a treasure. It's not the sort of plunder sagas are written about, but it's yours. And more importantly, you're alive. There's no slow-motion victory montage, no noble speech to mark your triumph, just the fading rush of battle, the clink of loot in your satchel, and the vague realization that you may have spent the entire raid shrieking like an angry gull. But you're here. You stood your ground. You didn't let go of your axe, even when your hands were slick with sweat and your heart threatened to pound straight out of your chest. Your tunic is streaked with mud and goat panic. Your ears are still ringing from the clash of blades. But there's something else in that ringing, a wild, unstoppable certainty. The older warriors whisper about it around the fire, speaking in low voices about that pulse of power, that rush of purpose that only comes when you're fighting for your life and winning. You didn't just watch the raid, you lived it. Next time, you'll fight better. swing harder. But for now, you know you're part of something bigger. The village smolders behind you, a memory already fading in the salt-laden air. The longship rocks in the shallows, and you drag yourself aboard, every inch of you aching. You slump over your oar, smelling like old smoke and new scars. The cut on your shoulder stings, but you didn't even notice it until someone else pointed it out. They slap your back and grin. "That'll scar up nice," they say, as if it's the best compliment in the world. Maybe it is. Your hands are raw, your thighs burn with the strain of the row ahead, and, somehow, there's a single chicken feather tangled in your braid. You're not sure if it's a trophy of battle or a remnant of lunch. Either way, it's a part of the story now. The row back across the water is quieter than the journey out. No boasts, no laughter, just the low groans of bodies remembering how to ache. Every stroke of the oar sends jolts up your arms, your fingers wrapped tight around the wood. Someone mumbles about who tripped over what, who dropped their axe, who sang too loudly. One warrior insists he fought off 5 villagers by himself. You watched him fumble his blade in a puddle and nearly cry. No one corrects him. Let him have his tale. Food is passed around in weary silence. The same dried fish and hard bread. But this time, there's a battered flask of ale making the rounds. It's warm, bitter, and tastes like triumph mixed with mold. You drink it anyway. It tastes like victory. You thought victory would feel like horns blowing and mead spilling from golden cups. Instead, it's the hush that settles in your chest, a deep, steady ache that says you did it. You crossed the sea, faced the unknown, and came back with nothing more than a bruised shin and a stolen spoon. But you came back. You hold that truth close, tucking it away in the space between your ribs and your spine. By nightfall, you're back at camp. The fire crackles, the meat sizzles, and someone's already snoring into their helmet like it's a pillow. You sit cross-legged on the cold ground, surrounded by your battered, triumphant crew. No one's boasting anymore. You're all just staring into the flames, listening for whatever the gods might have to say in the crackle of the wood. No gods speak tonight. Instead, someone passes you a roasted turnip, its skin charred and sweet, and you take it like it's a blessing. There's laughter, low, tired, the kind that only comes from sharing something wild and stupid together. You join in, not because it's funny. Nothing about raiding is funny, but because you survived it, and that's worth a laugh. Later, as the embers burn low and the last warrior's head droops in sleep, you curl up beside your shield, helmet still dented from the day's work. You're cold, you're sore, but you're alive. And you know, this is just the first of many raids, the first of many nights spent with dirt under your nails and blood on your tunic. But for tonight, you rest. You earned it. Raiding season fades when the cold comes clawing down from the mountains, snuffing out even the bravest embers. The fjord freezes. The longship is dragged up the shore and flipped on its back, a dragon put to sleep until spring. You pack away your axe and your armor, knowing that winter's no easier. It's just survival wearing a new face. Winter is harsh, endless, and icy. The chores multiply as the sun vanishes behind thick, gray clouds. Your breath turns to mist. Your fingers go numb with each new task. You chop firewood until your knuckles bleed. Drag buckets of water from the frozen stream that glares at you like an enemy. The goats, those stubborn beasts, now look to you for hay and shelter, You don't love them, but you respect the way they meet the cold with the same stubborn glare you see in your own reflection. They repay you by screaming at 3 in the morning, just to remind you that comfort is for the soft. The food situation quickly turns into a farce. Fresh meat? A luxury of memory. Now it's smoked fish, dried fish, and fish pickled in something that might as well be boot polish. For a hint of flavor, there's turnip mash that tastes like defeat. You eat in silence, every bite a grim promise to the next meal. You wear every layer you own, wrapped in wool and old furs that smell of damp and the ghosts of last year's had rain. Your hair never fully dries, clinging to your neck like a cold slap. Your toes are strangers to you, numb and distant, but still there, still yours. Your shield, now dusty and propped in the corner, calls to you sometimes. You polish it anyway, not because you need it, but because it reminds you of the girl who stood on the beach with her heart hammering in her chest, ready to trade everything for the chance to prove herself. Home is crowded, the longhouse thick with voices and arguments about who keeps moving the firewood and why the stew smells like old socks. The air is so smoky, you sometimes swear you're breathing half a forest. Your brothers wrestle in the corner. Your grandmother mutters to spirits only she sees. Your father complains about taxes paid in fish while your mother keeps the pot simmering. Every now and then, glancing at you with a look that says, "This is what we do. We endure." And you do endure. You train in the yard, boots slipping on ice, breath clouding the air as you practice the swing of your axe. Every movement is a promise to spring, to the next raid, to the next moment, when the world calls you to stand your ground. This is winter. This is your life. And as you toss another log on the fire, you feel it deep in your bones. The weight of everything you've survived, and the certainty that you'll face it all again, because you're a warrior, because you've seen the rush of battle and the hush that follows, and because even in the dead of winter, with the fjord frozen solid and the goats screaming at the moon, you're still here. The snow is a cruel mistress, biting and cold, but you find yourself outside in it anyway, sometimes just to get away from the smoky longhouse and the endless drone of family complaints. Your breath curls in the icy air, each inhale sharp enough to hurt, but you don't mind, even if your fingers freeze to the hilt of your blade, even if your boots sink ankle deep in frost, you welcome it, because the cold is honest, and you've learned to appreciate honesty. Something shifts in you during these long, frozen days. Your muscles harden like the winter earth. Your heart grows colder too, in the way that only makes you stronger. You stop noticing the smell of pickled fish and damp wool. Those scents just become the air you breathe. You stop caring about comfort or softness. You endure because there's no other choice. And in that endurance, you find a strange peace. Then, one morning, the snow begins to melt. It's so gradual, you almost miss it until you hear it. A single, thin bird call. It's the first bird song you've heard in months. A shrill, hopeful note that sounds like both a promise and a headache. You leave the longhouse and trudge to the fjord. The ice is cracking, jagged lines spreading like old scars across its surface. Spring is clawing its way back. Raiding season will return, and when it does, you'll be ready, starving for action, angry at the world, and itching to test your blade. Winter tried to kill you. It didn't win. You survived, if only just. Your prize for making it through winter isn't a feast or a song of your name. It's marriage proposals. They start innocently enough. A local farmer's son appears with a hopeful grin and a bundle of dried fish, mumbling that you'd make a strong wife. You raise an eyebrow, ask him how well he can swing an axe. He confesses he doesn't. You nod politely and tell him you don't do men who can't fight. He leaves, face red as a beet. The next suitor tries harder. He brings you a comb carved from antler, all smooth lines and careful details. You thank him with a smile, then use it to scratch your hound's ears. The hound is thrilled. The boy, not so much. He doesn't come back. Soon it becomes a kind of entertainment. Young men lining up like lambs, each carrying some trinket or treat, each thinking maybe they'll be the one to tame the wild girl with the calloused hands. The trouble is, you don't want taming. You want blood and fire, the crack of shields, and the rush of battle. You want nights spent feasting and boasting, nights that don't end in squabbles over whose turn it is to mend the goat pen. Your aunt tuts and says you should think about settling down. You grin and tell her you'll settle down when your axe rusts. She sighs and mutters something about dying alone. You counter with dying gloriously. And honestly, that sounds a lot more appealing than spending your life cooking stew. One particularly bold suitor challenges you to a duel. He says it's tradition. You say sure. Tradition's as good a reason as any to knock the smug out of him. The match is quick. He ends up with a shield-shaped bruise on his ribs and a new respect for women who train in snow for fun. After that, the marriage proposals dry up. Word spreads fast that you're not the sort of girl who dreams of hearth and home. It's not that you rear against love. It is that no one else made your pulse stutter like a war drum. And until they do, you're perfectly content to spend your evenings sharpening your blade and your wit. Some of the village girls whisper that you're too proud. Some of the boys whisper that you're too dangerous. Both are right. Instead of weaving at night like the other girls, you practice footwork. Instead of planning a wedding, you polish your shield until it gleams in the firelight. You sleep with your axe beside you, not for comfort, but because it's the one companion that never tries to tell you what to do. You've fought before. Raids, border clashes, petty feuds over livestock and insults. But this is war. It doesn't begin with fanfare. There's no stirring speech, no horns blowing, just the cold air before dawn, sharp enough to slice your breath in two, and the knowledge that the enemy is no pack of scared farmers. These are warriors, steel-clad and silent, sharpening blades and thoughts of you in equal measure. Your chieftain's speech is brief. Don't die stupid. Then he stomps off to tie his boots. You nod. That's good enough. You stand in the shield wall, shoulder to shoulder, with warriors you've shared stews and insults with. Your shield feels like an anvil in your arm. Your breath comes short and fast. Someone nearby retches into the snow. Another hums a song under their breath, an old tune that doesn't have words anymore. You don't join in. You're listening to the quiet, the heartbeat of the world, right before it explodes. The first clash comes like thunder. Shields slam together, swords wail, and someone falls. Probably more than one someone. You swing, block, duck, stab. There's no plan, no form, just instinct and the need to live one more second. Your shield cracks under a heavy blow. You let it go, draw your axe, keep going. The axe breaks. splintered in the grip of your own fury. You grab a spear dropped by someone who won't need it again, the haft slick in your palm. Time disappears in the chaos. Your arms burn. Your feet slip in the churned mud. But you keep moving. You're not thinking anymore, just acting, surviving at the edge of panic. At some point, you stumble. It's not heroic. No slow motion dive. No cry of defiance. You just trip, crashing down into the cold, wet dirt beside a body you recognize. Your breath catches. You can hear anything beyond the thud of your own heart and the distant roar of dying men. A shadow looms. You roll instinctively. A blade hisses past your cheek, close enough to leave a memory in your skin. Your fingers find a rock. You bring it up with all the stubbornness in your soul, and it works. It shouldn't, but it does. When the field finally quiets, it's not the earth holding its breath. It's the dead who will never breathe again. You sit there, mud caked to your arms, blood that's not all your own stiffening your tunic. You're trying to remember what it felt like to care about anything else. Fear, pride, hunger, none of it matters. You're just there, breathing in a world that almost ended you. A bird lands nearby, pecks at the mud, and flaps away with a startled squawk, like even it knows this place isn't meant for the living right now. You survived. You shouldn't have, but you did. And when someone finally stumbles over to ask how you managed it, you just shrug. Didn't have anything better to do, you say. And in that moment, you realize that's enough. Here's what they don't tell you. After the last clash, when the final war cry echoes and the blood's been scrubbed from your skin, you're still the same person. Same boots, same axe, same mysterious stain on your cloak that no amount of scrubbing can remove. But you notice the way people look at you now. It's different, not just like a fighter, but like a legend in the making. A tale whispered around smoky fires and carried to every neighboring hall. It's true, but it's not the whole story. Someone starts calling you the one who wouldn't die. Another, less kindly, nicknames you Goat Hammer, a title born from one disastrous scuffle that ended with you accidentally launching a goat at a fleeing enemy. You could correct them, tell them it was an accident, maybe explain that the goat was a better weapon than a blade that day. But you don't. Let them talk. You've learned that the truth is usually messier and less interesting than the stories they choose to believe. When you walk through the village now, people don't scatter. They step aside. It's subtle, the way they edge back just enough to let you pass, as if they were not sure whether you were about to ask for help or challenge them to a duel. You nod politely, and they nod back, eyes wide, lips tight. The children play games where they dare each other to tap your shield when your back is turned. None of them succeed. You once caught a boy mid-sneak and calmly handed him your axe. He froze like a deer in winter, eyes huge. You said nothing, just waited. He returned it to you without a word and ran off. Smart boy. Warriors who used to ignore you now ask your opinion before a raid. Not out of politeness, but because you've walked that line between life and death and come back more than once. You've got more scars than excuses, more stories than boasts, and they respect that. You're not the loud girl with a wild braid anymore. You're something sharper, something more dangerous. Travelers know your name, or something close to it. A merchant bows too deeply and calls you Mistress of Blades, his voice trembling like a reed in the wind. You correct him by spitting into a bucket and asking if he brought better cheese this time. He nods so fast, you think his head might come off. That's all you need to know. At night, around the hearth, you hear your own stories repeated back to you, warped, larger than life. Tales of you cracking shields with a single blow, of a glowing raven perched on your shoulder, of a berserker's kiss that left you a half mad and unstoppable. None of it's true, but you let them talk. It's funnier that way. You never wanted fame. You didn't smile for it, didn't chase it down. But now that it's here, you carry it like you do your shield. Worn, a little dented, but always ready. Once, you wondered if anyone would take you seriously. Now you wonder if they'll ever stop shaking long enough to actually speak. You're not the youngest anymore. There's a new crop of bright-eyed girls tying their braids too tight, gripping their axes too loose, talking too loudly about what they'll do in battle. You see yourself in them, though they're less battered and far more hopeful. They watch you closely, not like a hero, but like a storm that could break loose at any moment. You've earned that. Your joints ache in the mornings. Your wrist pops when the air's cold. There's a scar across your ribs that tingles whenever the sky promises snow. You don't heal as fast as you used to, and when you do, the pain lingers like an old drinking buddy who doesn't know when to go home. But you're not softer. You're just harder in the right places. You don't train now to prove yourself. You train to stay alive, to stay sharp. You eat slower, sleep lighter, and only speak when there's something worth saying, which means half the Longhouse hasn't heard your voice in weeks. When the younger Shieldmaidens, still full of bravado and questions, ask you how to win their first real fight, you keep it simple. Don't die. When they ask how to earn respect, you shrug, break someone's nose, then help them up. And when they ask if it ever stops being terrifying, you're honest. It doesn't, you say. You just get better at pretending. You still raid, though not as often now. When you do, people check to see if you're joining. If you are, they breathe easier. If you're not, they check their armor twice. Your axe has seen more than most men ever will. The handle's wrapped in new leather, the blade nicked and scarred, but still keen. It's survived more than any of your would-be suitors. You've thought about retiring it, hanging it up above the hearth like a relic. But then someone says something stupid, or a threat slinks over the hills, and you remember you're not done. You never really wanted to be. You never wanted to be legendary. You wanted to fight, to survive, to carve a place for yourself in a world that didn't think you should have one. And somehow, through blood, fire, and sheer stubbornness, you did. You're not just a shield maiden. You're a warning. And the next time someone asks if you still fight, you'll smile, just a little, and say, only when it's necessary, and sometimes just because I feel like it. But here's the thing. Long before hospitals and white coats, the Greeks had their own brand of healing. They called it incubation, and it was sacred, not lazy medicine. If you were sick in ancient Greece, you didn't summon a doctor. You packed your meager belongings and made a pilgrimage to the sanctuary of Asclepius, the god of healing. Epidaurus was the most famous. Marble colonnades and the scent of laurel and sacrifice heavy in the air. Upon arrival, you performed rituals of purification, bathed in sacred water, offered up a rooster, or whatever else you could spare. Then you prepared to sleep in the abaton, a dark, silent hall where patients lay down on mats, waiting for dreams. Snakes slithered freely around the chamber, sacred to Asclepius, symbols of rebirth and renewal. It was said that if the god favored you, he'd come to you in a dream, touch your wound, whisper your cure, hand you a vision of what you needed to be whole. These dreams weren't just visions, they were prescriptions. You'd wake and tell the temple priests what you saw, and they'd interpret it, like spiritual pharmacists, blending faith and the half-mad truths of dreams. Some say it was early psychosomatic therapy, a trick of the mind made real by belief. Others call it a theatrical placebo. But whatever it was, it worked. Because the journey to the temple, the cold stone under your feet, the hiss of the snakes in the dark, all of it pulled you out of yourself. It forced you to face your fears, your pain, your stubborn will to live. And maybe that's what you've been doing all along. Every clash of steel, every winter that tried to take you, every goat that screamed at the moon, you survived it all. No priest to guide you, no God to soothe your wounds, just your own battered faith in the weight of your blade and the iron in your spine. You didn't ask for the role they've given you, didn't ask to be the story people tell their children to make them braver, but you'll take it, you'll wield it, because it's yours, and you've earned it with every bruise and every breath. The ancient Greeks believed healing wasn't just a matter of the body. It was a sacred conversation with the universe. When the sick lay down in the dark Abaton halls of Asclepius's temple, they didn't wait for a doctor's cold touch or a sharp needle. They waited for a dream, for a whisper in the midnight hush, for the gentle slide of a snake across their feet, and the soft brush of a god's hand in the shadows. It wasn't exactly clinical medicine. It was more like a ritual of hope, a place where your fears were as real as your wounds, and your faith was the best prescription you had. Some patients woke up cured, others woke up inspired, but almost all of them woke up with a story to tell, some testament etched in marble or ink that said, "I was here, and I was healed." It didn't matter if the priests were more like poets than pharmacists. In a world so chaotic, even the hint of divine intervention was enough. The temple walls bore witness, inscriptions of limbs restored, blindness lifted, spirits soothed. These weren't clinical trials, but they were powerful testimonials. Written in stone, they blurred the line between medicine and magic, between dream and diagnosis. Healing wasn't about fighting the symptoms. It was about finding balance in a universe that didn't always care if you lived or died. And if you were lucky, maybe the cosmos would answer you back, sometimes with a whispered word, sometimes with a snake curled at your feet, silent and watchful. Now, let S leave behind the peaceful hush of those dream chambers and head east, into the dust and roar of ancient Mesopotamia. Healing there wasn't a gentle prayer. It was a battle of wills. Sickness wasn't just a cold or a cough. It was a spirit, a curse, a demon's hiss at the edge of your ear. And the cure, it was as much exorcism as medicine. In the land between the Tigris and the Euphrates, every fever had a name. Every ache had an enemy. The world was alive with spirits, and not all of them were friendly. Illness was a personal insult from the gods, or maybe from that neighbor you'd annoyed, or a vengeful ghost who'd been slighted by your ancestors. The cure was as direct as it was desperate. Trap the spirit in a bowl. They called them incantation bowls, simple clay dishes turned upside down and buried under thresholds and hearths. But they weren't decorative. Each one was a fortress of words, spiraling inward in tight, precise Aramaic. Spells wound round and round like a snake coiling to strike, calling on angels, gods, and the echo of every name that meant power. These weren't charms you hung in the doorway for good luck. They were commands, orders to bind the demon, to humiliate it, to lock it in a clay prison where it could glare at the world from crude, scratchy drawings of itself in chains. It was spiritual Tupperware. Seal the evil in, keep the family safe. Some bowls even included complaints about the neighbors, just to make sure no one was stirring the pot when your back was turned. You buried these bowls in the corners of your home, at doorways, anywhere the world met your private space. Demons liked edges, the places in between, just like nosy neighbors and other pests. The bowls kept them out, kept the family in, kept the peace in a world where curses were as common as gossip. Modern medicine might scoff at it all, but there's a strange sense to it, an ancient sort of logic. If you can name the fear, if you can draw its face and lock it in clay, you can live with it. You can breathe a little easier, knowing that whatever's out there in the dark has a name and a place where it belongs. Next time you feel the weight of something you can't see, check under your doormat. There might just be a bowl there still, holding back the shadows, with nothing but ink, clay, and a prayer older than history. But while the Mesopotamians were busy trapping their nightmares in pottery, the ancient Egyptians were chasing something else, something softer, sweeter, and wrapped in the scent of flowers. To them, healing wasn't just about the body, it was about harmony, about balance, about surrounding yourself with the sort of beauty that reminded you the gods were watching. At the heart of this fragrant medicine was the blue lotus, pale, hypnotic, and soaked in meaning. The blue lotus was more than a pretty face. It was a doorway, an invitation to the divine. They infused it in wine, blended it in oils, and offered it to the spirits in their grand stone temples. When the flower bloomed, it was like the sun itself had dipped down to touch the earth. The blue lotus wasn't just for healing the body, it was for healing the heart, for grief that hollowed you out like a winter wind, for pain that wouldn't let you sleep. Ancient paintings show partygoers clutching these flowers like talismans, priests offering them to statues with gold-leafed eyes, and even the dead wrapped in linen and lotus for the long journey beyond. But the lotus was only one petal of the Egyptians' medicinal garden. Their knowledge was dazzling, an endless catalog of remedies that blurred the line between the practical and the mystical. In the dusty pages of the Eber's Papyrus, a 20-meter scroll that reads like a spell book, you'll find everything from honey-based dressings to crocodile dung suppositories. Yes, really, garlic, frankincense, and myrrh, ingredients that modern science still respects for their cleansing bite, sat side by side with potions that called on the names of gods and spirits. They believed every cure had two parts, the tangible and the intangible, a poultice for the wound, a prayer for the soul, a doctor who doubled as a priest, because in this world, healing was half science and half sorcery. Toothache, you might get a poultice of herbs, or you might get a small cooked mouse pressed against your jaw, depending on who you asked. Headache, a spell was chanted over your brow, words weaving through the smoky air like threads of fate. It wasn't just about the ache, it was about the soul, the balance of your ka and your body. The line between treatment and ritual was so thin it almost disappeared. Temples were hospitals in their own right, places where the sick came not just for bandages, but for blessings. They offered prayers to Sekhmet, the lion-headed goddess who ruled over plagues with a bloody smile. You can almost hear the whispers in the sandstone halls, the mingled scents of incense and sweat, the low hum of voices asking the gods to notice them, to heal them, to spare them, because even in the world of blades and blood and goat-stinking raids, there's always been this truth. People want to be whole. They'll drink bitter brews, wrap themselves in charms, even lie down with snakes if it means the pain might stop. And they'll do it with hope, with faith, with the stubborn belief that maybe, just maybe, the cosmos will answer back. You've seen this, haven't you? Not in a temple of marble, but in the way your own body sings after a fight, sore but alive, in the way you keep your blade sharp, not just because it's needed, but because it's a promise to yourself that you're still here, in the way you sit by the hearth at night, listening to the old tales that mix memory and dream until you can't tell them apart. The world is still full of shadows, still full of spirits that no bowl or spell can ever fully banish. But you've learned something the Greeks knew, the Mesopotamians feared, the Egyptians wove into every prayer. Healing isn't just about tending the wound. It's about finding a way to keep going, to make your peace with the dark, to stand up tomorrow and say, not today, not yet. So tonight, as the wind rattles the eaves and the goats mutter in their sleep, you sit by the fire and sharpen your axe. The world outside is cold, and your shoulders ache, but your heart is steady, because you've seen the gods in your dreams and in the mirror, and you've decided that whether they bless you or not, you're here. In ancient Egypt, if you recovered from an illness, it was proof of your strength. If you didn't, well, perhaps the gods were testing how stubborn you could be. But make no mistake, these weren't people who lived by spells alone. The Egyptians had a way of weaving together the magic of dreams. With the cold precision of a blade, they performed surgeries to mend broken limbs, set bones with the same care they carved stone, and lanced abscesses like the night splitting open the dawn. They even understood the pulse, felt for it in the wrist, counted it like the beat of a drum, using it to listen to the secret rhythm of life beneath the skin. They studied urine to read the color of your troubles, peered into your eyes for the flicker of something gone wrong. Greek healers like Hippocrates and Galen, those old masters of medicine, would later borrow from these Egyptian ways, weaving them into their own cures and codes. Still, no matter how sharp their knives or how steady their hands, the rituals never left, because in Egypt, healing wasn't just about fixing what was broken. It was about calling back the soul from wherever it wandered. It was about aligning your blood and bones with the eternal beat of the world. Sometimes, all it took was a flower and a whispered spell, a flicker of faith wrapped tight in linen and hope. Meanwhile, far to the north, where snow falls like judgment and the air crackles with spirits, healing took on a different urgency. In the icy lands of Siberia and across the wild forests of the Americas, illness wasn't just a matter of blood and bone. It was a theft, a piece of your soul, gone missing, stolen by something unseen, and the only one who could bring it back was the shaman. Shamans weren't your typical healers. They didn't wear white or speak in soft voices. They were part priest, part warrior, part cosmic tour guide. Their craft wasn't a tea about potions and bandages. It was about stepping sideways into the world behind the world. Their healing was a journey. It might take hours. It might take days. Drums thundered like the pulse of the earth itself. Voices rose in chants that cracked the sky. Smoke coiled in the air, thick with herbs and something older, something that had no name. Shamans fasted, chanted, danced, until their feet were bloodied and their minds had slipped the leash of ordinary thought. Why? To find the missing piece of you, to step into the dreamlands and pull you back from the edge of the void. These weren't metaphors. To the shaman, to the patient, to the whole village, these were battles as real as any fought with steel. A shaman might don an animal cloak, the mask of a bear or a wolf, calling on spirits that prowled just out of sight. They might swallow bitter roots or drink potions that sent them reeling through the veil between worlds. Ayahuasca, a brew from the heart of the Amazon, turned the mind inside out, purged the body, and opened the eyes to things better left unseen. Soul loss could come from grief, from shock, from a broken promise or a wound that never closed. The symptoms? A heaviness that wouldn't lift, a tiredness that no sleep could cure, a string of bad luck that seemed to follow you like a shadow. Today, we might call it trauma or depression, but for the shaman, it was a sign, a cry from the soul that it had lost its way. The cure was to call it home. A healing ceremony might mean the shaman calling your name into the dark, or dancing around the fire while your family watched. Breathless, it might mean a whispered prayer pressed against your ear while you slept, or sacred smoke blown over your face like a promise. Sometimes, the shaman would act out the battle itself, clawing at the air, shaking like the storm, miming the struggle of pulling something invisible from your skin. In other traditions, they would touch the pressure points on your body as if coaxing the lost spirit back to the light. This wasn't a sterile affair. Healing was messy, communal, raw. It was about memory and myth, about weaving the patient back into the story of the world. Because in these cultures, you didn't just catch a cold, you caught a crack in your soul. And if you were lucky, someone brave enough would go into the dark to bring you back. While the shamans of the north were chasing lost souls, the sages of India were mapping out the whole dance of life, turning the rhythms of existence into a system as intricate as the night sky. Ayurveda, meaning the knowledge of life, was less about war and more about balance, less about fighting disease and more about keeping the world inside you in step with the world outside. If your stomach was off, it wasn't just something you ate. It was the song of the cosmos out of tune. Ayurveda spoke of 3 doshas: Vata, air and space; Pitta, fire and water; and Kapha, earth and water. Each person was a mix of these forces, their health and even their moods shaped by how they spun around each other. A healer's job wasn't to kill a disease. It was to bring you back to that sacred rhythm. They used herbs that sang in the body, foods that fed the spirit as well as the flesh. They practiced massage, drizzling warm sesame oil or ghee across the skin in slow, careful strokes. They meditated, they chanted, they watched the breath like a hawk, because in each breath, the soul's balance was laid bare. There were treatments that would make you cringe, detoxifying enemas, induce vomiting that they called vamana. Brutal, maybe, but to them, it was purification, a way of scrubbing the soul clean. Ayurvedic texts, like the ancient Karaka Samhita, read like a bridge between science and faith. They listed herbs for every ache, diagrams of how the body's channels flowed, and gentle reminders that greed and anger could poison you as surely as spoiled meat. Doctors were taught to read the body like a poem, checking the tongue, the eyes, the pulse, even the tone of your voice, to find where the balance had tipped. The cure wasn't a battle, it was a realignment, a chance to find harmony again. And sometimes it meant a warm oil bath and a prayer that was half a promise to the gods, half a promise to yourself. While India balanced the dance of the doshas, ancient China was listening to another song altogether, the low, constant hum of qi, the life force that threads through every living thing. In Chinese medicine, sickness wasn't just a problem to be solved. It was a message from the qi, a sign that somewhere, somehow, the river of life had gotten dammed up or turned in on itself. Healers learned to read the qi like water, flowing through a valley, watching for places where it pooled or twisted, using needles and herbs to set it moving again. Acupuncture wasn't just about pain relief. It was about setting the body back into its own music. Herbal formulas blended root and leaf, flower and seed into potions that tasted like the earth itself. Qigong exercises moved the breath in slow looping arcs, teaching the body to find stillness in motion. Like the others, it was about balance, not just health, but wholeness, knowing that even the smallest change in the world outside could echo in the chambers of your heart. Because in every culture, every time, there's been this truth. Healing isn't just about what's broken. It's about remembering how to live again. And maybe that is the lesson you've carried in your own bones. The one that kept you fighting long after your body said stop. You're not here just to stand in the shield wall. You're here to stand in the world, axe in hand, heart beating like the drum of the earth, the same drum the shamans heard, the same beat that echoes in the temples of every faith. You're not just healing the cuts and bruises of battle, you're healing the part of you that refused to stop, the part that still believes there's something out there worth the fight. So tonight, when the cold wind rattles the longhouse and your fingers ache from old wounds, you remember this isn't just survival. It's balance. It's harmony. It's the quiet voice inside that says, you're alive, and that's enough. In traditional Chinese medicine, your body wasn't just a lump of flesh and bone. It was a river of life, an invisible current of energy flowing through every cell. When that river ran smoothly, you felt strong, whole, and balanced. But when it pooled up, dried out, or burst its banks, sickness took hold. Health, in this world, was all about flow. At the center of this ancient worldview were two cosmic dance partners, yin and yang, cold and hot, dark and light, passive and active. A good healer didn't just ask, where does it hurt? They asked, which element is shouting too loudly? Which one has fallen silent? Were you burning with too much fire? Or was your water stagnant and still? Was your spleen grumbling like an old gossip? Was your liver holding onto an ancient grudge? Diagnosis in Chinese medicine was part science, part poetry. Healers read the body like a poem of pulses and whispers. They didn't just take your pulse once. They read it in several places, each spot tied to a different organ, each thump of blood, a note in the song of your life. Your tongue told its own story, the color of your troubles, the shape of your worries. Even the sound of your voice was a clue, a tremor here, a hesitation there. The treatment wasn't a war on disease. It was a gentle coaxing, a rebalancing act. Acupuncture was the first step. Thin needles slid along meridian lines, coaxing the energy to move, unblocking the flow like freeing a river from winter's grip. To the uninitiated, the thought of needles might sound like torture, but for many, the experience was strangely calming, an echo of a deeper rhythm that they'd forgotten. But needles were only one tool. Cupping was another. Warm glass cups kissed to the skin, pulling tension and stagnation to the surface. Moxibustion brought heat in the form of burning mugwort, a gentle warmth that chased the cold from your bones. There were movement practices like qigong, exercises that taught the breath to dance with the body in slow looping arcs. And always, there were the herbs: ginger, ginseng, licorice root, each chosen not just for what it did, but for how it balanced your inner world. One of the most revered texts in this tradition is the Huangdi Neijing, the Yellow Emperor's inner canon. Written more than 2,000 years ago, it's a conversation between the emperor and his physician, not just about how to treat an ache or a fever, but how to live in step with the seasons, how to keep your spirit and your blood moving with the world. In these teachings, your body wasn't a sack of organs. It was a miniature cosmos, a reflection of the whole universe. A stomach ache wasn't just a bad meal. It might be grief you'd never voiced. Healing was never just physical. It was emotional, moral, elemental. And when things fell out of tune, the healer's job wasn't to fight the imbalance, but to invite it back into the music, like tuning a harp or coaxing a frozen stream back to life. Sometimes that meant the gentle sting of a needle, sometimes the smoky dance of burning mugwort. Always, it meant listening to the body, to the breath, to the quiet music of the world. Far from the ancient cities of China, across the sprawling plains and tangled forests of Africa, healing has always been something bigger than one body. It's a community event, a gathering of voices, ancestors, and the spirits who whisper in the shadows. Unlike the Western image of a lone patient in a sterile white room, traditional African healing pulls everyone in: the family, the neighbors, the ancestors who watch from the fireside. In these cultures, sickness isn't just an ache in your bones. It is a crack in the web of your life, a disruption in the balance of things that ripples out to touch everyone around you. Healing isn't a personal affair. It's a social ritual, a cosmic reckoning, and it might involve more than a few startled chickens. Take the Sangomas of southern Africa, spiritual healers and bone diviners who move between the worlds of the living and the dead. A Sangoma doesn't just ask about your cough or your fever. They read the bones, literally. They cast a handful of bones, shells, and charms across a mat, and in the scatter, they find your story. It's a kind of spiritual radiology. Each bone a word, each shell a sentence, spelling out the tale of your sickness and its cure. The diagnosis might be a curse from an old enemy, an ancestor's displeasure, a wound in your spirit that's bled too long. Once the bones speak, the healing begins. There may be animal sacrifice, offerings to the spirits who keep the world turning. There are plant-based remedies, brews of roots and leaves whispered over in the dark. And there is music, drumming that thunders like the heartbeat of the earth, singing that calls the soul to stand up and listen. This isn't entertainment, it's medicine. The music is a tool to move energy, to open the mind, to invite the spirits, to join the dance, in the drumming, In the sway of bodies, the line between the living and the dead blurs, and somewhere in that blur, the healing begins. Plants, too, have always been at the heart of these traditions. Herbalists, in Yanga, know the secrets of every leaf and root. Fever? There's a tea for that. Infertility? A paste made from the bark of a tree older than your grandmother's grandmother. Some herbs are steeped in water, others burned to chase away the sickness, like smoke chasing shadows. This isn't some careless foraging. It's a pharmacy carved into memory and song, guarded by generations who know that the green world can both kill and cure. These healers know every plant's story, who it's for, what it does, and how to speak to it like an old friend. Illness might come from the usual culprits, bad air, bad luck, but it might also come from breaking a taboo, stepping out of line with the world around you. Healing, then, isn't just about patching up the body. It's about mending the tear in the social fabric. It's about making peace with your ancestors, your neighbors, the spirits in the hills. And it's done not in hushed clinics, but in the open air under the watchful gaze of the stars. The world has always been full of ways to heal, some gentle, some fierce, some as strange as dreams. Whether it's the Egyptians with their perfumed oils and spells, the shamans dancing at the edge of the spirit world, or the Chinese healers listening to the river of chai, the lesson has always been the same. You're not just a body, you're a story, you're a world. And for you, you've known this in your own way. Out there on the ice-slick fields, axe in hand, sweat in your eyes, you've learned that healing isn't about banishing every hurt. It's about standing back up, one breath at a time. It's about the small rituals, binding your braid tight, testing the edge of your blade, breathing in the cold air, and knowing you're still here. You're no stranger to pain. You've worn it like a second skin. But you've also learned that pain doesn't get the last word. You do. So tonight, when the fire crackles low and the snow whispers outside, you remember there's a river running through you too, a current of something fierce and bright that refuses to be stopped. It's not just blood. It's not just muscle. It's the pulse of every battle you've survived, every choice you've made to keep going. And that's healing in its purest form. In these traditions, healing wasn't just a matter of patching up a wound or quieting a cough. It was a matter of restoring the whole world that lived within you. To break a taboo, like speaking ill of the spirits or crossing the wrong grave, was to let a crack open in the great web that held your life together. Healing, then, wasn't just about poultices and herbs. It was about confession, apology, and sometimes a purification ritual that involved chicken blood, sacred ash, or a family gathering so awkward you'd rather face a bear. But the lesson was simple. You weren't a single, isolated being. You were part of a vast breathing network, ancestral, spiritual, ecological. Your breath carried the memory of your grandparents' songs. Your bones hummed with the stories of the land. And when something went wrong in you, whether a fever or a shadow in your mind, it echoed through that network. The healer's job was to listen to the echoes, read the patterns, and stitch the world back together with herbs, chants, and the watchful presence of the ancestors gathered in the firelight. In many Native American nations, healing was never about fixing just one part of the body. It was about cleansing the whole person. A cough wasn't just a cough. It was a sign that something deeper had gone awry, that the harmony between you, your people, the spirits, and the land itself had faltered. Illness wasn't random. It was a sign, a message that balance had been lost. One of the most profound healing rituals in these traditions is the sweat lodge, a ceremony of heat, song, and rebirth. The lodge itself is humble, a dome of willow branches covered in blankets or hides, small enough that when you kneel inside, you feel like you're back in the belly of the earth. Inside, the air is thick, dark, and hot. Heated stones, called grandfathers, glow red in the center pit. Water infused with cedar or sage is poured over them, and the steam rises, filling every breath you take. In that darkness, guided by a spiritual leader, you leave behind the outside world. You let go of pride, pain, and the masks you wear. It's no sauna, it's a womb, a place to sweat out sickness and sorrow, a place to listen, really listen, to yourself, to the low murmur of songs that stretch back through centuries, to the crackle of the stones that hold the earth's memory in their heat. Each round in the sweat lodge is more intense than the last, each with its own purpose: gratitude, forgiveness, letting go, calling back the ancestors. In the stifling dark, people find visions, tears, or an unexpected peace. It's not always pleasant. The heat can feel like it's scraping away your skin. The sweat stings your eyes. But that's the medicine, the raw, unflinching honesty of it. Other healing ceremonies, like smudging, the gentle smoke of sage or sweetgrass, or healing songs passed down from elder to child, each word a living medicine, work in the same spirit. Sand paintings of crushed stone swirl into intricate patterns during healing rites, aligning the spirit world with the body's rhythms. But it all comes back to one truth. Healing isn't about isolation. It's about connection to the land, to the people around you, to the echo of your own heartbeat in the night. The purpose isn't to sweep illness away as if it never was. It's to bring you back into balance, to remind you who you are and how you belong to this earth. After tracing these ancient healing paths, from Greek dream chambers to the sweat lodges beneath the stars, one thing becomes achingly clear. Ancient healing was never just about the flesh. It was a full body experience, a journey through mind, soul, and the world itself. The tools were different: blue lotus, demon trapping bowls, herbal brews that could kill a cough or raise a vision. But the goal was always the same: bring harmony back to the body and the world that held it. In every corner of the ancient world, health wasn't just about not being sick. It was about standing in the flow of life without fear or imbalance. It was about dancing with the seasons, listening to the quiet hum of your ancestors' breath in the wind. The rhythm of your own blood was seen as part of the great cosmic song. Whether that song was chi flowing through meridians, the steady beat of a drum in the dust, or the soft breath of a patient in the dark, these rituals worked because they gave meaning to the pain. They gave the sick a place to stand, a story to hold. They said, "This suffering isn't meaningless. There's a shape to it, and there's a path back." Even when the science was more poetry than precision, even when a Mesopotamian demon bowl couldn't to kill a single germ, it could ease a mind that was tangled in fear. Even if a shaman's soul retrieval didn't mend bones, it could stitch up the ache in the spirit. Where modern medicine focuses on pathogens and chemistry, ancient healers understood that humans are creatures of story. We want to understand why we hurt. We want to believe there's something we can do about it. Ancient healing gave people both an explanation, spirits, imbalance, ancestral wrath, and a path back to the fire. These weren't sterile clinics. They were communal spaces, alive with drumming feet, low songs, and the smell of cedar smoke. The healing was messy, yes, but it was powerful because it wasn't done alone. And here's the twist. After centuries of scientific triumph, the world is coming full circle. Modern medicine is beginning to remember what the old ways knew, that the mind and body are one river, not two. That meditation can calm the heart. That music can heal wounds invisible to the eye. That plant-based medicines can do what lab-made chemicals can't. Even psychedelic-assisted therapies, guided journeys into the mind's hidden places, echo the ancient practices of the shamans who danced with spirits to bring a soul home. Hospitals now incorporate music, aromatherapy, culturally rooted ceremonies that acknowledge the whole person. Science has proven what the ancestors always knew in their bones. Healing is not just a matter of chemistry, it's a matter of connection. So, what do these ancient healing rituals teach us? Not just about herbs and chants, but about ourselves. That we're not machines to be fixed. We're ecosystems to be tended. That sometimes a whispered prayer or the steady beat of a drum can reach places that scalpels and syringes can UT. And maybe, most of all, that healing isn't about erasing what's broken. It's about finding your place in the world again and remembering how to walk there with strength. The ancients knew that well, and in all their messiness and mystery, they remind us of something we still need to hear. Healing isn't just a medical process. It's a human one that begins in the quiet of your own breath and ends in the chorus of the world around you. Because before there were clinics and charts and chemical formulas, there were shells, tiny mollusk shells, pierced and threaded into necklaces that carried the memory of the sea. There were chants, soft songs that rose in the dark, weaving comfort from fear. There were fires that burned bright against the cold, and people who believed that to heal was to stand together, to let your heartbeat match the drum, and to remember that you're part of something bigger than your own bones. And if you can hold on to that, if you can stand in the center of that old, echoing truth, then you're already halfway home. Those tiny shells, strung together and worn close to the skin, weren't just for beauty, they were for meaning. Some of the oldest jewelry in human history has been unearthed from places like Blombos Cave in South Africa. Tiny beads, over 75,000 years old. They were smoothed and pierced by hands that understood that even in a world of hunger and fear, there was room for adornment. Each bead was a whisper of identity, a breath of culture, threaded together with care. In those days, survival was a daily battle, every dawn a fresh challenge. And yet, our ancestors still took the time to shape these small treasures. Why? Because these early ornaments were more than decoration. They were language. A necklace of bone or shell might say, "This is my place in the tribe. This is the story I carry." In the days before written words, these beads were sentences, wearable stories that said who you were, what you'd seen, and who you belonged to. Jewelry was culture made portable. A string of shells wasn't just pretty, it was a message carried across landscapes, proof of trade and exchange, of alliances and friendships stretching beyond the nearest fire. Even communities far from the sea treasured these coastal beads, hints of distant waves carried home like trophies. It was an early hint that even then humans reached beyond the horizon, curious and hungry for connection. But it wasn't just about social signals. There was magic, too. Many anthropologists believe these early adornments were more than simple trinkets. They were talismans. Shells whispered of water's mystery. Bones sang with the memory of ancestors. And teeth spoke of the strength of predators bested. A tooth around the neck was a declaration. I faced the beast. I survived. In a world that could kill you with a single cold night or a hungry shadow, that was no small boast. These first beads, these small declarations of self, marked a turning point in human thinking. They showed an awareness not just of what lay inside a person, but of how that self appeared to others. To string a shell around your neck was to say, this is who I am, and I want you to see me. Identity and survival wrapped together like strands of fiber. And as human societies evolved, so too did their adornments. In the Paleolithic world of ice and mammoth bones, jewelry became even more layered with meaning. It wasn't enough to wear these pieces in life. People began to take them into death as well. In the ancient grave sites of Sunghir in Russia, dating back 30,000 years, a child no older than 10 was found laid to rest in a tunic, shimmering with over 4,000 ivory beads. Each one had been carved from mammoth tusk, each one a testament to hours of labor and devotion, thousands of hours spent shaping those tiny beads, threading them one by one to cloak a child in beauty and protection for the journey beyond. What does that tell us? That jewelry had become something more than a way to mark life. It had become a sacred farewell, a promise of safe passage into whatever waited after breath, a talisman for the soul's journey. These pieces weren't rushed or careless. They had symmetry, rhythm, and pattern, evidence of an aesthetic sense far older than we used to believe. Pendants shaped like animals, beads carefully aligned in repeating patterns, bracelets carved from reindeer antler, all hinting at both technical skill and spiritual purpose. And the materials they used told their own stories. Baltic amber, found far from its coastal origins, hints at long-distance trade routes, pathways of exchange that crisscrossed icy lands. Jet, a fossilized wood as dark as midnight, was prized for its deep, almost liquid shine. Millennia later, it would become the material of mourning jewelry. Red ochre, that blood-colored pigment, was used to stain beads and burial shrouds, maybe to speak of life, maybe to promise rebirth. Jewelry in the Ice Age wasn't just for show. It was a map of identity. It said who you were, where you belonged, and how much your people valued you. A grave rich with beads and adornments was a sign of honor, maybe for a leader, a shaman, or simply someone deeply cherished. And perhaps, too, these pieces were tokens of love, of promises made and remembered. We may never know for sure. The Ice Age left no written records, only the silent testimony of beads and bones. But what remains is striking. Even in the coldest, harshest world, humans took time to shape beauty, to wrap themselves in art. Jewelry was a quiet rebellion against the indifference of nature, a refusal to be swallowed up by the ice and the dark. As humanity stepped out of the Paleolithic and into the Neolithic and Bronze Ages, jewelry took on new roles, no longer just markers of family or spirit. These pieces became tools of power. Amulets, pendants, and charms weren't just beautiful. They were shields, tiny pieces of magic meant to guard the wearer from the thousand small curses of life. In ancient Egypt, this magic took on breathtaking complexity: scarabs, ankh symbols, and the all-seeing eye of Horus. These weren't just pretty baubles. They were worn like spiritual armor. The scarab, that little beetle so common in the desert sands, stood for rebirth and the endless cycle of the sun. To wear it was to say, I will rise again. These amulets weren't reserved for the living. Pharaohs were laid in their tombs with gold amulets shaped like falcons, cobras, and scarabs, each a promise to the gods, a plea for safe passage into the afterlife. Children wore fish-shaped amulets, charms to guard them from drowning in the unpredictable Nile. Every piece of jewelry had a story, and every story was woven through with the divine. The materials themselves carried power. Gold wasn't just precious because it was rare. It was considered eternal, an earthly echo of the sun's light. To wear it was to borrow a fragment of the god's radiance. Lapis lazuli, that deep celestial blue, was imported from as far as Afghanistan to adorn the brow of queens. It wasn't just color. It was a shard of the night sky, carried on the body across the ancient world. Jewelry became a way of touching the divine. In Mesopotamia, cylinder seals carved from semi-precious stones carried both beauty and bureaucracy, tiny amulets that marked ownership, but also prayers pressed into soft clay. In Minoan Crete, delicate goldwork depicted bees and lilies, weaving nature's abundance into every curve. Jewelry was no longer just adornment. It was magic made tangible, shield against misfortune, a song to the spirits, a bridge between the human and the divine. And in all of this, whether it was a child as tunic of beads buried in the Russian snow, or a pharaoh as golden scarab laid in a tomb as dark heart, there was the same pulse, the same ancient heartbeat that said, we are here, we endure, and we remember. Because jewelry was never just about survival. It was about meaning, about taking the raw materials of the earth, bone, shell, stone, and threading them together until they became something more than the sum of their parts, something that could speak in the language of the soul. It was about belonging, about defiance in the face of cold winds and long nights, about the power of beauty to carve a place for the human spirit in a world that can be both cruel and breathtaking. And maybe in the quiet moments when you run your fingers over the smooth curve of a shell or the weight of a pendant at your throat, you can still feel that ancient echo, the promise that even in the hardest times, there is always room for art, always room for meaning, because when the world grows cold, we wrap ourselves in what we can make, and in that making, we remember who we are. In those ancient worlds, gold wasn't just rare, it was believed to be imperishable, the very flesh of the gods. To the Egyptians, it was the color of the sun's promise, the eternal glow that refused to fade even in death's cold embrace. Lapis lazuli, a deep celestial blue drawn from the heart of distant mountains, was thought to grant vision into realms beyond the mortal. It wasn't just a gem, it was a shard of the night sky itself. Turquoise, carnelian, faience, each carried its own weight of magic and memory. Jewelry became a kind of secret code, tiny cosmic ideas strung together and worn close to the skin. In Mesopotamia, these beliefs thrived too. There, jewelry didn't just sparkle in the light, it carried power. Cylinder seals were carved with protective deities, worn around the neck like keys to unlock the divine. Beads etched with sacred symbols were believed to keep disease and demons at bay, transforming a simple necklace into a shield. Even kings, those men who measured their worth in palaces and conquest, wore jewelry not just as a display of wealth, but as spiritual armor. Heavy bracelets, collars, earrings, each was a whisper to the gods, a promise of faith, a plea for favor in a world that never promised safety. The ancient Greeks took up this mantle too, weaving their own spells into gemstones. Soldiers carried amulets into battle, engraved with gods and monsters, tiny warriors of stone and faith. One figure above all was favored, the Gorgoneon, the head of Medusa, whose gaze could turn evil to stone. It was worn like a curse turned back on itself, a defiance of everything that sought to harm. These amulets weren't just for kings and heroes. Common folk wore them too. Clay, copper, or iron if they couldn't afford gold. But the intention was the same, a daily handshake with the divine, a quiet promise that even in the swirl of chaos and the scrape of survival, the gods might be watching. In these worlds, jewelry wasn't a luxury. It was medicine. It was protection. It was a prayer you could wear on your wrist or slip around your neck, a talisman that turned fear into something you could carry and maybe conquer. As civilizations grew more layered, so did their jewelry. What had begun as a sacred whisper became a bellow of power. No longer just protective, these pieces now shouted of hierarchy and status. They said, I am chosen, I am favored, and you are not. From Mesopotamian queens to Chinese emperors, jewelry became a political language spoken in gold and precious stones. In Sumer, one of the world's first great cities, the royal tombs of Queen Puabi gleam with this power. Buried around 2600 BCE, she was entombed in layers of gold and lapis lazuli, elaborate headdresses, necklaces strung with hundreds of beads, large gold earrings that framed her face like the sun itself. Even in death, her jewelry was a performance, a declaration that her authority didn't end with her final breath. It carried her spirit forward, draped in the shimmer of eternity. The Egyptians took this to even greater heights. Pharaohs wore broad collars, heavy with turquoise, enamel, and gold. Each link and bead a story of divine kingship. Their crowns were inlaid with serpents, cobras poised to strike at any who dared challenge their sovereignty. Even the children of the elite wore amulets and rings, tiny shields of power they barely understood, but wore all the same. Jewelry here wasn't just for festival days. It was diplomacy worn in plain sight, a statement of who held power and who didn't. In ancient China, the chosen material wasn't gold. It was jade, smooth, cool, and luminous. Jade was more than beautiful. It was a symbol of virtue, purity, and moral strength. Confucian ideals linked jade's luster to the soul itself, resilient but not brash, serene but unyielding. Emperors were buried in jade suits sewn together with gold thread, a final armor against decay, a prayer for immortality. Across the Mediterranean, the Mycenaeans, Greeks, and later the Romans carried on this tradition of adornment as power. Mycenaean lords wore gold wreaths shaped like laurel leaves, the emblems of victory. During funerals and rituals, an echo of the sun caught in metal, Roman senators flaunted signet rings engraved with their family crests, each a key to power and a badge of status. Jewelry was never just decoration. It was a currency of loyalty and favor. A necklace could seal a marriage or a political alliance. It could mark you as a friend or as someone to be watched. In the shifting tides of courtly intrigue, a single bracelet could tip the scales of power. By the time writing emerged, jewelry was already more than an art. It was infrastructure. It carried the weight of law, of faith, of empire, a subtle language of command, worn around the throat, draped across the chest, flashed in a single lift of the hand. Behind every shimmering crown or signet ring was a craftsman with smoke-stung eyes and calloused fingers. Ancient jewelers worked in flickering light, bending fire and metal to their will. They were more than artisans. They were magicians, turning raw ore into something that could outlast bone and breath. As societies grew complex, so did the techniques of adornment. Jewelry was no longer just beads or simple hammered metal. It became a craft of breathtaking skill, intricate filigree, granulation, tiny balls of gold that seemed to defy gravity. These were the signatures of the master's hand. Enameling added color that would never fade. Inlays of lapis or turquoise turned metal into canvases for cosmic dreams. And always, always, there was the story. The amulet that warded off the evil eye. The pendant that tied a child to the protection of the ancestors. The bead that sang of distant coasts and rivers that glittered like a promise. Because jewelry was never just about the person who wore it. It was about the hands that shaped it, the world that breathed life into it. It was the link between the human and the divine, proof that even in a world of iron and conquest, there was still room for beauty, still room for a whisper of faith. And maybe, if you hold one of those ancient pieces today, if you feel the smooth curve of jade or the weight of a golden bead, you'll feel that echo, the quiet, fierce heartbeat of the ancestors who took the time to make something beautiful, even when the world was cold and dark, who believed that in the act of making, there was something eternal, something that could outlast even the grave. Because that's what jewelry has always been, a promise, a defiance of the end, a soft, glinting reminder that no matter how fragile the body, the spirit can still shine. And so you stand here centuries later, still wrapping yourself in metal and stone, in color and light. You do it not just to catch the eye, but to catch the soul. Because deep down, you're part of the same story, the same old song that says, I am here, I endure, I remember. And that is a beauty that no empire, no time can ever tarnish. In the Bronze Age, the art of jewelry making didn't just emerge. It exploded like a forge fire, casting new light on human ingenuity. Metal was no longer just hammered into simple forms. It became art, engineering, and alchemy all at once, often centuries ahead of its time. In the hands of ancient artisans, raw metal turned into something more. A statement, a story, a piece of the cosmos worn around the neck. Picture the Minoans of Crete, crafting gold jewelry so refined it could pass for modern art. Tiny bees, wings outstretched and glistening, cradled drops of honey, suspended like captured sunlight. Lions roared in mid-motion, and goddesses took flight in miniature, wings flaring against time's slow erosion. These pieces weren't just ornaments. They were miniature myths, fragments of the gods, made to rest against mortal skin. Egyptian goldsmiths took the magic even further. With blowpipes and patient breath, they coaxed fire to bend to their will. Open molds waited for molten gold to flow in rivulets, shaping amulets and collars so elaborate they still stun the modern eye. From the tomb of Tutankhamun, a scarab pectoral emerges, a piece so intricate it defies comprehension. It contains not just gold, but Libyan desert glass, a substance born from an ancient meteorite's fiery kiss to the sand. Here, jewelry wasn't just decoration, it was cosmic. Meanwhile, in the Indus Valley and across the bustling markets of Mesopotamia, craftsmen were discovering new ways to bind beauty to metal. They drilled through stone using bow and string mechanisms, each spin of the drill a small victory against the stubbornness of the earth. They perfected intaglio carving, etching tiny scenes onto seal stones that were more than art. They were identity, protection, and a prayer all at once. And then there was lost wax casting, an innovation so elegant it still echoes in modern workshops. It began as a wax figure, a small dream of the final form. Coated in clay, the wax melted away in the kiln's heat, leaving a hollow that could be filled with molten metal. The result? Rings, earrings, pendants, lightweight yet complex, fragile and strong in equal measure. This wasn't just jewelry. It was a testament to the human ability to see what didn't yet exist and bring it into being. By the time of the Etruscans and the Greeks, jewelry had become an entire industry. Specialized workshops hummed with activity. Engravers, polishers, gem cutters, each adding their skill to the final masterpiece. Techniques like filigree, delicate threads of gold woven together, and granulation, tiny gold beads fused to create shimmering surfaces, were perfected. Hinges, clasps, even tiny lockets appeared, turning jewelry into something both practical and profoundly personal. These advances weren't just about luxury, they were about possibility. They told stories of trade, of cultural exchange, of the human spirit's refusal to stop at good enough. The rise of the jeweler meant that identity itself could be crafted, refined, and carried on the body for all to see. As trade routes snaked across deserts and oceans, jewelry became more than local tradition. It became a symbol of connection, of diplomacy, of empire, of dreams stretching across continents. A single gemstone might cross a dozen kingdoms and as many languages before it finally came to rest on the breast of a queen or the hilt of a warrior as sword. Take lapis lazuli, a stone of deep blue, more prized than gold in the ancient world. Its only known ancient source lay in the mountains of what is now Afghanistan. Yet these tiny pieces of sky turned up in Mesopotamian temples, Egyptian tombs, and even in the palaces of Mycenaean Greece. This wasn't mere trade. It was an exchange of ideas, of faith, of the shared belief that something so beautiful was worth any journey. Ancient merchants carried these treasures over mountain passes, through scorching deserts, along winding rivers. Their caravans were the arteries of the world, carrying not just goods, but whispers of foreign lands. And the jewelry they carried became more than adornment. It was proof of the world's endless reach. The Phoenicians, those master sailors, became the middlemen of the ancient world. Their ships cut through the waves from the Levant to North Africa and up into the Mediterranean. In their wake, they left more than glass beads. They left echoes of Egyptian lotus motifs in Iberia, Assyrian designs tucked into Greek workshops. The Silk Road brought pearls from the Persian Gulf, rubies from India, jade from China. Sometimes these treasures ended up in Roman markets, a single bead telling the story of continents. Jewelry didn't just cross borders, it bound them together. A Chinese jade hairpin in a Central Asian grave might speak of a marriage alliance. A Persian turquoise ring sold in a Greek port told of empires meeting on the same dusty road. Even war couldn't stop this trade. In fact, jewelry often became part of the negotiation. Tribute and bribery blurred into one. Emperors sealed treaties with gold chains and jewel-studded belts. Invading armies were placated with gem-studded diadems and gold bangles, heavy enough to buy a king's mercy. Among the common folk, jewelry was more than status. It was survival. In many cultures, jewelry was a form of portable wealth, a nest egg you could wear. A bride's dowry often included rings and bracelets of coin, both adornment and insurance policy. If disaster struck, war, famine, a sudden flight in the night, she could trade those pieces for safety, for passage, for the future. Imagine a young bride in a bustling market, her bangles clinking softly as she walks. They're not just pretty, they're a promise that even if the world turns cruel, she will have something to bargain with. Even if the hearth goes cold, the gold will not. Jewelry was never just about beauty, it was about power. It was about love. It was about a grandmother pressing a necklace into a child's essy hand with the quiet words, "This was mine, now it's yours." It was about a warrior threading a lion's tooth onto a leather cord, a whispered prayer for courage in the clash of steel. It was about the tiny beads found in the burial of a child, each one carved with care, a testament that even in the coldest times, someone took the time to say, "You mattered." And so jewelry, whether a simple string of shells or a golden diadem, became the most human of inventions, a way to hold the memory of the earth's treasures close to the pulse of the living, a way to tell the world who you were and to carry that story with you wherever you roamed. Because in the end, jewelry is not just metal or stone. It's hope, hammered and polished. It's love, strung bead by bead. It's the spark of human defiance, the refusal to fade, the quiet chant that says, "I was here, I still am." And as long as there are hands to shape it and stories to wear it, jewelry will never just be an accessory. It will be a promise, a legacy, talisman against the darkness. And that, more than gold, is what has always made it precious. In those ancient worlds, jewelry wasn't just a final flourish, it was a lifeline. For a woman facing famine or needing a path away from danger, a necklace could be more than a pretty sparkle. It was survival. She could sell it to buy bread, to pay a debt that loomed like a winter shadow, or to fund the steps of a journey into the unknown. In this way, jewelry became humanity's first global brand, instantly recognizable across borders, endlessly adaptable to local tastes, and always carrying that same ancient promise. This is precious. I am connected to the forces that made it so, from the caravans that braved desert winds to the caravels that sliced the salt spray of the sea. Jewelry traveled with us, part ornament, part passport, part promise. It moved in step with the beating hearts of those who wore it, their stories woven in every glint of gold or bead of bone. While jewelry began as a marker of status and divine protection, it eventually took on another, more intimate role, the symbol of love. Long before diamond rings sparkled in velvet boxes, humans marked their bonds with beads and bangles, with rings and talismans. In ancient Egypt, rings weren't merely decorative. They were vows encircled in metal. Their circular shape, with no beginning and no end, whispered of eternity, woven from reeds, shaped from ivory, or cast in soft gold. These rings were exchanged by couples who believed in the promise of endlessness. The Egyptians believed the third finger of the left hand was connected by a vein that ran straight to the heart, the vena amoris, as it would be known in later centuries. To wear a ring, there was to bind your soul to another, to say, "Here is my heart," worn where the gods can see. The Romans, too, embraced this language of rings. Betrothal bands, called annulus, pronubus, were often iron, a testament to strength and endurance. Some bore portraits of the couple, or hands clasped in a motif known as the fede, a symbol of unity that would echo through medieval Europe and beyond. These rings weren't just sweet nothings. They were legally binding, tied to dowries, inheritances, and the legitimacy of children yet to be born. Other cultures use bracelets, necklaces, or matching amulets to mark the bond of lovers. In some tribal societies, a pair of lovers might exchange talismans of bone or wood, items believed to stay spiritually connected no matter how far the wearers wandered. These tokens were more than tokens. They were lines of energy, invisible threads tying one life to another across distance and time. Weddings became showcases for these adornments. In India, a bride is wrapped in gold, nose rings, anklets, hairpieces, each shimmering curve a prayer for prosperity, protection, and fertility. The Mangal Sutra, a black beaded necklace tied by the groom, was more than a symbol. It was a shield, a silent vow worn against the skin. Across cultures, jewelry has carried secret messages of love. In Renaissance Europe, posy rings bore engraved verses hidden inside the band, visible only to those who shared the secret. Some held tiny compartments for perfume or locks of hair, small relics of devotion that turned a ring into a memory kept close. In this way, jewelry became an archive of love, a relic of trust, a keepsake of intimacy, a testament that no matter how much the world shifted, the bond remained. Passed from hand to hand, from heart to heart, these pieces whispered, "You are not forgotten. We are still linked." But jewelry's magic didn't end with the bonds of lovers. It reached out to touch the divine. Throughout ancient history, jewelry was a bridge to the gods, a visible sign of faith. It wasn't just about beauty or wealth. It was about invoking blessings, pushing back the shadows, and marking sacred roles. In Mesopotamia, priests and priestesses wore jewelry that was as much a spiritual uniform as it was adornment. Pectorals and headdresses shimmered with symbols, planets captured in gold, weapons of gods etched in silver, each piece a prayer cast in metal. To wear it was to wear the very shape of the cosmos. Egypt took this reverence further still. High priests donned jewelry to channel divine favor, not just to look splendid, but to align themselves with cosmic forces. The Menet necklace, heavy with beads, was more than ornament. Worn by the priestesses of Hathor, it was believed to bring fertility and divine music to the one who shook it. In ceremonies, they rattled the Menat, calling the goddess's laughter down into the mortal world. The famed Usek collar, seen in so many painted tombs, was a solar symbol in itself. Its wide, curved shape echoed the journey of the sun god Ra across the sky. To wear it was to echo that journey in miniature, to weave the light of dawn into each breath. In India, too, jewelry was woven into the fabric of faith. Hindu and Buddhist traditions saw earrings, bangles, and anklets not just as beautiful, but as keys to spiritual health. Each piece was said to stimulate energy points on the body, aligning the chakras and inviting harmony. Gold was reserved for the divine, shimmering proof of purity and immortality. Statues of deities were draped in intricate gold jewelry, each offering a sign of devotion, because the gods deserved beauty as rich as the world they watched over. Across the oceans in the ancient Americas, the Maya and Aztecs revered jade as the stone of life itself. Its cool, green depths were more than beauty. They were a promise of fertility, of renewal, of balance. To hold a piece of jade was to hold a fragment of the eternal. And through it all, jewelry remained more than just metal or stone. It was a prayer you could wear, a memory you could carry, a promise you could keep close even as the seasons turned. Because even in the harshest of times, humans have always reached for beauty, not just to decorate, but to declare, to say, I am here. I am part of something larger, whether it was a mother's necklace, tucked away for a daughter's future, or a soldier's amulet clutched before battle. Each piece was a testament to the heart's refusal to be forgotten. As civilizations rose and fell, jewelry adapted. It became a language of power, a map of trade routes, a diary of devotion and defiance. And behind every gleaming pendant or carved bead was the quiet voice of the earth itself, offering up its treasures, and the patient, tireless hands of those who shaped them. So the next time you fasten a chain around your throat, or slip a ring onto your finger, think of those who did it first. In caves, lit by flickering firelight, in temples heavy with incense, in markets that smelled of spices and sea salt. Think of the stories they told, the fears they chased away, the loves they bound with a single thread of gold or a bead of jade. Because jewelry isn't just something we wear, it's something we believe in. A promise that even in the hardest days, there will always be something to hold on to, something to remind us that we are more than the dust that claims us, something that says, in a language older than words, you are precious, you are part of the world's endless, beautiful story. In the ancient world, jade wasn't just a stone, it was a heartbeat in mineral form, a cool, living breath of the earth. The Maya and the Aztecs saw it as life force, captured in green light, more precious even than gold. Priests wore pendants carved from jade, each curve a prayer, each angle a bridge to the divine. When rulers died, they were buried with jade in their mouths, a final offering to guide the soul on its journey beyond. Even in the early days of Christianity, jewelry carried more than just beauty. It carried protection. Amulets, inscribed with crosses or tiny images of saints, weren't just pious. They were shields against the invisible, worn by farmers and priests alike. These small pieces glowed with faith. They were whispers of divine favor, little bits of hope, clutched close against plague, demons, and temptation. In every corner of the ancient world, spiritual jewelry was a universal language. A necklace was rarely just a necklace. It was a prayer, a boundary, a map of the heavens wrapped around your neck. It was a quiet promise that even in a world of chaos and shadow, you carried a spark of the eternal. As civilizations rose and fell, cities swallowed by desert sands, temples cracked by earthquakes, jewelry remained, buried in tombs, hidden in ruins, passed hand to hand across generations. It was a vessel of memory. What began as beads on a string became something far greater, a statement of identity, a promise of belonging, a clue to lives once lived. In the burial sites of Scandinavia and Nubia, jewelry still speaks when bones have gone silent. A single brooch can reveal where someone came from. A ring can hint at the hands that once held it in a marriage long turned to dust. A necklace of mixed beads gathered from distant lands tells of migration and trade, of a world bigger than any one life. Even how jewelry was worn, layered across the chest, braided into hair, or hidden close to the skin, tells us something about those who lived and died. These pieces weren't meant to fade with the flesh. They were meant to outlast it, to pass from mother to daughter, father to son, to keep the thread of memory unbroken, even when the world itself seemed to fray. Imagine a warrior's ring, slipped from finger to finger, across generations, each new bearer adding a story to the one already etched in the metal, or a mother's pendant, pressed into the palm of her child on a wedding day, a promise of continuity in a world that never stands still. Jewelry was more than just wealth. In times of exile or crisis, it was the weight of identity itself. When cities fell and families scattered, what could you carry? Not the walls of your home, but the small pieces of your past that would not bend or break. A simple bangle could hold more meaning than 1,000 words. A memory of laughter, of love, of prayers whispered in the dark. Gold doesn't rust. Gems don't rot. Long after the fires have cooled and the stories have slipped from memory, these pieces endure. They carry human fingerprints, not just the physical traces of touch and polish, but the marks of pride, of longing, of hope, and heartbreak. Even today, we echo those ancient instincts. We inherit wedding bands, each scratch a record of decades of shared mornings. We wear necklaces with initials, lockets that hold the scent of someone lost but never gone. We keep jewelry in boxes, not for their price, but for the warmth of memory they hold. So when we look back at ancient jewelry, we're not just studying fashion or metallurgy, we're studying human longing, the longing to be seen, to be protected, to belong, to be remembered, wrapped in gold, strung in shell, cast in bronze. The story of jewelry is the story of us, as durable as it is delicate, as personal as it is eternal. And now, beneath the golden wheat fields and the sleepy roads of northern France, there's a secret that few expect. Near the Somme River, outside the quiet village of Naours, lies a hidden city, not of stone towers or marble columns, but of tunnels and shadows, a massive underground labyrinth carved into soft chalk, winding for more than 3 kilometers beneath the earth. It's easy to miss from above. A small entrance in the woods, a doorway to another world. But step inside, and the air grows cool. The light turns to memory, and you realize you've entered a ghost city. The tunnels widen into rooms, twist into passageways, open onto hidden chambers that once held kitchens, stables, even a chapel. Long corridors lead to dead ends, perhaps for storage, or for something more secret. It's less like a cave, and more like the bones of a city buried alive. What's most haunting isn't just the scale, it's the silence of its birth. No record tells us who carved these chambers or when. Historians guess it began in the Middle Ages, somewhere between the 9th and 13th centuries. But why? Was it a monastic retreat? A secret refuge from Viking raiders? Or something else entirely? One theory says it was a haven dug by monks and villagers, a refuge in times of invasion. The chalk so soft that a pickaxe could carve a room in days. Clever ventilation systems meant fires could be lit without choking those hidden below. From the outside, it was invisible. From within, it was a world of safety carved from fear. Over time, the city beneath Naours grew. Wells were sunk deep into the earth. Smoke chimneys were hidden in hollowed-out tree trunks. Horses were stabled underground, their hoofbeats muffled in the dark, a city within a city, built to endure what the surface could not. And yet, for centuries, this ghost city vanished from memory until a priest with a passion for history stumbled across its secrets in the 19th century. But even that was only the beginning. What started as a medieval refuge would find new life centuries later. In the war to end all wars, World War I, soldiers found their own sanctuary in Nahurs. They scratched their names into the walls, carving echoes of themselves into the chalk. French, Australian, British, thousands of names, a testament to young men who crouched in the dark and waited for a dawn that might never come. To walk through Nahurs is to step into a blueprint of an invisible civilization. The walls, cool and chalky to the touch, whisper of centuries of labor. There are no signs of machines, no mark of haste, just precision and patience. Each chamber a testament to human hands and human hope. The chalk was soft, easier to cut than granite or marble. But the real challenge wasn't the digging, it was the engineering. How do you build a labyrinth without bringing it crashing down on your own head? How do you keep the air fresh when there's no sky to see? The people of Nahurs figured it out. The rooms are arranged with a cunning that would impress any architect. Arched ceilings cradle the weight of the earth above, and secret vents pull in fresh air like the breath of the living. It's as if those who dug these tunnels understood something deep, that safety is never just a matter of walls, but of the spaces between them, that the silence of the earth can be turned into a fortress. And so, Nahurs remains, a city of chalk and echoes, a memory of those who refuse to be forgotten. Like the jewelry of the ancient world, it's a testament to the human impulse to endure, to carve safety from darkness, to weave beauty into the hardest of times. Because whether it's a jade pendant pressed to a priest's chest, or a necklace handed down through generations, or a labyrinth of tunnels beneath a field of wheat, the message is always the same. We were here, we endured, and we left behind something that still glows in the quiet places, proof that even in the hardest times, we are more than the dust we leave behind. We are the stories we carve into stone, the promises we wear on our skin, the songs we sing when no one else can hear. And as long as those echoes remain, we are never truly gone. There's a logic to Nahurs, a quiet brilliance in the way its hidden city unfolds beneath the earth. Living spaces carved small and tight, just enough to warm with the heat of breath and fire. Storage rooms hollowed into the chalk, cool enough to preserve the taste of autumn apples or the last crumb of bread through the coldest months. And then, the communal halls, broad enough for a gathering, suggesting a society that refused to be cowed even when the world above turned to war. Entire sections of the labyrinth were set aside for animals, horses in particular, stabled underground in shadows, thick with quiet snorts and shifting hooves. Whoever built this place didn't just plan for days. They planned for weeks, even months. They carved their hope in the stone, a testament that they would not bend to the hammering of fate. But the most striking part of Nahurs' genius lies in its hidden breath, the ventilation shafts, dozens of them, narrow chimneys winding up from the depths to the world above. Hidden among trees and brush, they were masked by nature itself. From within, fires could burn, food could cook, lungs could draw sweet air, and no enemy would see the faintest thread of smoke. rising to betray them. There's no sign of forced labor here, no frenzied rush of conquest. The halls of Naurs speak of a slow, deliberate creation, expanded room by room as need grew, generation after generation, adding their own quiet signature to the chalk. It's a testament to patience, to community, not a fortress of a king's decree, but a refuge born of cooperation and the hush of prayer. Walk through these tunnels and you'll see it. The doorways, carefully rounded to stand the weight of centuries. The ceilings, arched and reinforced with the kind of care that speaks to fear and to faith. There is no luxury in these walls, but there is beauty all the same. Beauty in the geometry of survival, in the way repetition becomes art when it's born of will and necessity. And perhaps that's why Naurs has endured. It wasn't carved by the orders of a throne or the whip of a conqueror. It was carved by families who understood that survival is its own form of holiness, that in the cold dark there is still a kind of light when people come together. History keeps its secrets well, but there are whispers of who first dug into the soft white chalk of Naurs. In the dark years of the Middle Ages, northern France was a crossroads of violence. Vikings in their longships, mercenaries with empty bellies and sharp blades, armies that saw no difference between church and village. In those days, the monks stood at the front lines of faith and fear. Monasteries became more than places of prayer. They became sanctuaries of the body as well as the soul. And so, the theory goes, monks were the first to turn pickaxes on the chalk beneath Naurs. They dug not just to flee, but to keep the faith alive. Even in the dark, hints of this echo through the tunnels. Deep in the labyrinth lies a chapel, its ceiling rising just enough to suggest something more than utility. A simple altar still holds its place, carved from the same stone as the rest of the city. There are faint etchings along the walls, worn by time, but still breathing the memory of verses or blessings long lost to the world above. This was no storeroom, no bunker for warriors. This was a place for souls. But time is a river with many bends, and the monks were not the only ones to find shelter here. As centuries turned and wars swept through the green fields of Picardy, Naurs became a sanctuary for everyone. Local villagers and peasants learned the paths of the labyrinth, their feet echoing in the same halls that once held psalms. Oral tradition speaks of entire families vanishing into the earth when danger came, of parents pressing children's heads low against their shoulders as they crept down the winding stairs, of food rationed and quiet laughter when the fear allowed it. They say that at its height, Naurs could hold 3,000 souls. Imagine that, a hidden city breathing in unison beneath the enemy's boots. Picture it, the dark corridors filled with the scent of smoke and damp earth, the soft clink of iron pots, the hush of prayers whispered against the walls, a child's cry quickly soothed, a mother's lullaby as old as memory echoing off stone. Outside, mercenaries looted and armies burned. But here, in the quiet belly of the world, there was dignity, a place to wait, to hope, to outlast the storm. Naurs wasn't just a cave, it was a community. The layout itself speaks of organization, of rules, and respect. Who took the best rooms? Who tended the precious animals? Who kept watch by the hidden chimneys? The details are gone, but the blueprint of order remains. In the carved geometry of these halls, you can almost see the outlines of an underground council, silent decisions made by flickering lamplight. For some, this was survival. For others, it was a way to keep the light of civilization alive. Even in the dark, they found ways to laugh, to sing, to carve tiny marks of themselves into the chalk. Small names, simple prayers, the kind of graffiti that says, I was here, I was alive. And as the centuries turned, the story of Naur shifted once more. The wars of old gave way to new ones, deadlier, more far-reaching. When the guns of the First World War thundered across France, soldiers from every corner of the world found themselves in the green fields of Picardy. And once again, Naurs opened her hidden heart. They came from France, from Britain, from Australia, and New Zealand, young men with eyes too old for their years. In Naurs, they found a refuge, a place to rest away from the front lines, to etch their names into chalk instead of into the history books of war. Even today, you can see them, thousands of names scratched into the soft walls, a roll call of the living and the lost. They wrote their hometowns and regiments, their dreams and jokes, a litany of boys who wanted to be remembered. The labyrinth that once held the whispers of monks now cradled the voices of soldiers. There is a hush in Naurs that no bomb could break, a silence that carries the breath of all those who sheltered here. Monks, mothers, warriors, wanderers. You can feel it in the way the air tastes like memory, in the way your footsteps seem to echo back not just your own heartbeat, but the heartbeats of thousands. What began as a refuge became a legacy, and what remains is more than just a labyrinth of tunnels. It's a testament to the oldest impulse in the human soul, the desire to endure, to find a way to live, even when the world above is lost to ruin, because survival is more than just the absence of death. It's the quiet defiance of fear. It's the refusal to vanish without leaving a mark. And in the walls of the Naurs, that defiance still breathes. The city beneath the fields is a monument to that stubborn hope. The same hope that carved beads from shells in the Ice Age, that shaped gold into amulets in the temples of Egypt, that turned rings into promises and bracelets into maps of love. It's the same hope that threads through every piece of ancient jewelry we still wear today. So whether it's a pendant worn on a battlefield, a wedding ring passed down through generations, or a labyrinth carved into the chalk of Picardy, the message is the same. We are more than flesh. We are memory. We are promise. And we will not be forgotten. Naurs was a city carved from necessity, a parallel society hidden in the quiet chalk. Its walls never meant to shine with gold, but to cradle human breath, a labyrinth of hushed prayers and candlelight, built not out of luxury, but out of the urgent need to endure. In those secret halls, lives unfolded like whispered stories. Monks in quiet contemplation, peasants and children taking shelter from the world above that never stopped burning. And so, Naurs endured, century after century, in absolute silence. It became the hidden spine of the land, a place where life could wait out the storms of history. For centuries, it was more than just a refuge. It was an entire world beneath the fields, a self-reliant ecosystem of survival. Above, the wars raged and the kings changed. Below, the people of Naurs simply breathed and waited. But as the world turned, slowly, relentlessly, Naurs itself began to slip from memory. In the 18th century, as northern France saw a fragile peace, the need for an underground refuge diminished. The fields above turned golden with wheat. The villages rose again, permanent roots striking into the soil. Generations passed, and the tales of Naurs thinned like mist at dawn. Families who had once taught their children the secret paths no longer spoke of them, and so the city beneath was forgotten, not devoured by earth, but by the slow erosion of memory. No records of its use during the Napoleonic Wars, no mention in the crackling pamphlets of the French Revolution. The 19th century rolled by with barely a breath about the tunnels. Naurs became a story for children, a cautionary tale of hidden rooms and ghostly monks, nothing more than folklore whispered on winter nights, until one day in the 1880s, curiosity cracked the silence. A Catholic priest named Father Ernest Danicourt was no conqueror, no warrior, but he had the gift that outlasts empires. Wonder, Danicourt heard the whispers, stories of a shepherd boy who claimed to hear a hollow echo beneath his feet as he walked the fields. Most laughed it off, called the boy mad or fanciful. But Father Danicourt was not so quick to dismiss. He began to look with new eyes. He found a shallow depression in the land, a place where the earth dipped as if it remembered the weight of centuries. Clearing away the brambles, the priest's hands trembling with the thrill of discovery, he found a narrow entrance, just wide enough for a man to slip inside and leave the sun behind. Lantern in hand, he descended. The air grew cool and heavy, the flicker of flame catching on pale walls that seemed to breathe in the dark. Room after room, hallway after hallway. Each turn of the labyrinth revealed more. Stables, kitchens, the ghost of a chapel, its altar worn but still waiting. Father Danicourt was the first in perhaps 150 years to walk those halls. In the soft echo of his steps, you can almost hear the centuries exhaling. He cleaned the rooms, mapped them with careful precision, and began to catalog the site with a scholar's patience. And in time, he opened Naurs to the world above. Visitors came in wonder, tramping down from the green fields to see this secret city that had hidden itself so well. They walked the silent streets of chalk, staring at walls that once held the laughter of children and the quiet prayers of monks. They marveled at how something so massive could slip from the memory of an entire people. And yet, even as he uncovered so much, Danicourt was left with questions that no lantern could illuminate. The medieval timelines he proposed were plausible, but the walls gave no dates. Some passages seemed newer, some older. Each tunnel a question mark carved in white stone. Who had dug the deepest shafts? Who had sealed certain rooms? What secret decisions had been made in the dark? In the end, Danicourt understood only one thing for certain. Naurs had not been built by accident. It had been shaped by the same stubborn hope that had always driven humankind to dig beneath the weight of the world. Decades later, the world changed again. The peaceful wheat fields of Picardy were torn apart by a new kind of horror. The First World War turned northern France into a sea of mud and blood, a landscape of barbed wire and cratered no-man's lands. Above, the sky itself seemed to bleed, artillery roaring like a mad god. But even as the earth was torn open, Naurs remained, and in that terrible war, the labyrinth found a new purpose. Soldiers from every corner of the world, France, Britain, Australia, New Zealand, marched across the broken fields. In Naurs, they found more than shelter. They found a piece of the past that seemed to understand their fear. By flickering candlelight and the faint glow of carbide lamps, young men carved their names into the chalk walls. Thousands of names, scratched in with bayonets, scrawled with pencils, written in the hurried hand of boys who knew that tomorrow might never come. They wrote their regiments and their hometowns, Sydney, Manchester, Toronto, a roll call of voices that had crossed oceans only to find themselves in the dark. Some etched small prayers, others the names of sweethearts left behind. One Australian soldier simply wrote, "I am still here." In those tunnels, laughter mingled with fear. Songs were sung to the chalky ceiling. Cigarette smoke curled in the stale air, and always the scratching of names, each one a promise that even if the war swallowed them whole, they would not be forgotten. Today, the names remain, a litany of the living and the dead. The labyrinth of Naur is not just a monument to the Middle Ages, it is a testament to the stubborn, unyielding pulse of humanity. In every carved letter, you can feel the weight of someone's heartbeat, a boy's quiet vow to leave a mark that war could not erase. What began as a refuge carved by monks became a sanctuary for soldiers. What was once a prayer for safety became a testament to survival. And in the walls of Naurs, you can see the shape of hope itself, hope that can be carved from the softest stone and still stand against the darkest night. Because the story of Naurs is the story of every human who ever looked at the chaos of the world and said, "I will find a way to endure." Oh, it is the same story whispered in the curves of ancient jewelry, in the patient etchings of a wedding ring, in the quiet prayers that echo through cathedrals and caverns alike. We dig our sanctuaries in the earth and in our hearts. We shape them from memory, from need, from the fierce refusal to fade. And even when the world forgets, there is always something that remains, some hidden place where the breath of those who came before still lingers. Naur endures because it was born not of conquest, but of community, not of luxury, but of necessity. It is a city without kings or crowns, built instead by hands that knew the weight of fear and the quiet promise of hope. And that is why it still stands, an echo of the past, a monument to all those who refused to be lost. In the shadowed halls of Naurs, where centuries of silence held sway, the 20th century's bloodiest war found a new refuge. The labyrinth that had once sheltered monks and villagers now became a secret sanctuary once again, this time for soldiers who had come from the farthest edges of the empire to fight on foreign soil. French, British, Australian, and Canadian troops, young men with dirt under their nails and exhaustion in their bones, passed through the region as part of the Somme offensive, one of the deadliest campaigns of the entire war. It turned the rolling fields of Picardy into a graveyard of dreams. But in Naurs, for a brief moment, they found something else, a hush away from the thunder, a breath of cool air when the world above roared like a beast. Some came to Naurs for shelter, others came for curiosity, their minds aching for anything but the endless trenches and mud. They found a world beneath the earth, ancient corridors winding like memory, walls that had once echoed with monastic chants and now caught the whispered curses of boys too young to know how to stop shaking. But they didn't just visit, they left their mark. More than 2,000 inscriptions carved into the soft chalk walls, each letter a testament to the refusal to be forgotten. Names, ranks, battalions, hometowns, a human time capsule, scratched out in the same careful hand they used to clean their rifles. Some were elaborate, marked with military insignia, a proud kangaroo here, a British crown there. Others were heartbreakingly simple. Tom, 1916. J. Carter, 14th Battalion, names that might have been lost to the mud and blood of the Somme. But here, in the White Stone, they endure. Many of these soldiers were Australian, men of the Australian Imperial Force. Far from the sun-baked plains of home, the red dust replaced by cold chalk and the weight of European winter. Historians believe some were brought to Naurs during short rest periods, others during reconnaissance patrols. Maybe the winding tunnels reminded them of cave systems back home, the Jenolan Caves of New South Wales, where the earth swallowed sound and light just as it did here. Or maybe it was just the wonder of stepping out of trench hell and into an ancient city that had once defied time itself. Some of the names were carved just days before the Battle of the Somme began in July 1916. A slaughter that would swallow thousands in a single sunrise. Many of those boys never made it back to Australia, or to England, or to Canada, but their writing did. Their presence still lingers in these quiet corridors, not as ghosts, but as echoes. In recent years, researchers and historians have traced these inscriptions, piecing together family trees that stretch across oceans and generations. Descendants, grandsons and great-nieces, have walked the same tunnels, fingertips tracing the same letters their ancestors etched in a moment of defiance. In Naurs, the past is not a story in a book. It is a living breath caught in the chalk. Today, Naurs has become a living memorial, not through parades or statues, but through these human scratchings. In the cold stillness, their words still whisper, "I was here. I mattered. Don't forget me." That's what makes Naurs so haunting. Not just the scale of the labyrinth, though that alone is enough to steal your breath, but the sheer weight of memory in every inch of wall. These aren't random scrawls or mindless graffiti. They are deliberate, careful, intensely human. A name carved in stone is a voice refusing to vanish, a last line of defense against the oblivion of death. Over 2,000 inscriptions have been catalogued so far, most bearing the same details: names, ranks, battalion numbers, and dates. Some are precise, like a military ledger. Pinch Kelly, 3rd Battalion AIF, March 1916. Others are more cryptic. Just a set of initials, a year, or a single word: home, peace. The chalk walls became a canvas of memory, each letter scratched out with the same discipline they brought to the front. In some sections of the tunnels, Australian soldiers from the 1st and 2nd Divisions claimed entire walls, turning them into unofficial regimental memorials, names layered like sediment, each one a breathless defiance of the dark. It wasn't about ego. It wasn't about conquest. It was about being remembered. In the madness of war, with the noise and fury above, there was something grounding about carving your name into the quiet, a simple mark in the stone to say, "I was here. I lived." Some went further. They carved their hometowns: Sydney, Perth, Manchester, small talismans of home, carried in the heart of a labyrinth, far from everything they loved. They scratched crosses and military insignia, small icons of faith and duty. A few even etched messages. "Goodbye, France." One wrote in a moment of clarity and fear. Another simply marked the wall with, "Still alive." And then there are the dates. So many from the spring and summer of 1916, the days before the Somme erupted in flame and ruin. The proximity of these peaceful carvings to the slaughter above makes Naurs feel like a moment of suspended time, a held breath before the storm. In the years since, military historians and genealogists have pored over these names, using them to stitch families back together across decades. Descendants who thought their ancestors had vanished into the mud of history find them here instead, alive in the stone, their stories still waiting to be heard. Some descendants have come to Naurs themselves. They walk the same tunnels, their fingers tracing the names of grandfathers or great uncles. They stand in the same small rooms where laughter might have echoed once, or where a young man wrote his name because he was too afraid to say it out loud. In those moments, the labyrinth is no longer a relic. It is a family reunion across centuries, because in the end, that's what these carvings are: a defiance of erasure, a refusal to be lost. In a war that turned fields into graveyards and men into numbers, Naurs is a chorus of names, each one a story that could not be silenced, and so the labyrinth remains, a sanctuary of memory as much as of stone. The chalk walls hold not just the ghosts of the past, but the beating hearts of those who refuse to become ghosts at all. When you walk those tunnels now, the air feels different. It's heavy, yes, but alive with the weight of all those voices. You can almost hear them in the silence, the low murmur of boys sharing a cigarette, the soft scrape of a knife on chalk, the half laugh, half sigh of someone who still can't believe how far from home he's come. Naur is more than a labyrinth. It's more than a refuge. It's a reminder that even in the worst of times, we reach for the same thing: to be seen, to be remembered, to carve our names into something that will outlast the noise. In those white walls, you can still feel it, the stubborn spark that says, I was here, I mattered, and in that simple truth, whispered in stone, Naurs remains not just a relic of the past, but a promise to the future. Because long after the guns fell silent, after the last echoes of war had slipped away, the names remain. They stand like sentinels in the chalk, guardians of memory, of laughter, of lives too young and too bright to be forgotten. In the labyrinth beneath the fields of Picardy, Naurs was never just tunnels carved in chalk. It became something far deeper, far older, a living document etched not in parchment or paper, but in the stubborn breath of men who refused to be erased. Each name carved into the walls wasn't to just a mark of presence. It was a final vow. I was here. I mattered. I will not be forgotten. And yet, after the Great War ended, silence fell once more over the labyrinth. The soldiers were gone, many of them forever, swallowed by fields of crosses and graves that blurred into the horizon. Naurs became a quiet place again, the names they carved fading beneath layers of dust and chalky damp. In those first years, after the guns fell silent, the labyrinth was visited here and there, a curiosity to the living, a quiet echo of something too vast to put into words. But for most it became little more than a footnote to the war, a hidden relic that spoke too softly to compete with the thunder of history. As louder battles, decades slipped by, and Naur seemed to vanish into the same fog that swallows so many memories. Between the wars, it was opened up here and there, its dark halls a novelty for curious wanderers. After World War II, it was reopened once again, listed in glossy brochures as a medieval oddity, a quaint underground city to wander through on a Sunday afternoon. But what those pamphlets couldn't say was what truly lay beneath the surface. Visitors strolled through the dim corridors, lanterns bobbing, laughter echoing faintly. They passed the walls of chalk like casual guests at a museum, never realizing they were brushing past the final words of boys who never came home. Each faint scratch in the stone was a heartbeat frozen in time, but few stopped to listen. Worse still, the labyrinth suffered for its own quiet. The gentle chalk that had once cradled lives began to crack under the weight of careless hands. Lighting rigs scorched the ancient graffiti. New markings, tourist names, idle doodles, were scratched in next to the century-old signatures of soldiers who had written not for glory, but for memory. Dust and mold grew in the dark corners. The slow rumble of footsteps and the vibration of modern visitors began to eat at the stone itself. And so, the true weight of Naur's, its spirit, its whispered voices, remained buried, wrapped in a cloak of souvenir shop tales and shallow retellings. The inscriptions were there, clear as a bell to anyone willing to see. But no one was really looking. It took nearly a century for that silence to crack open once more. In 2014, a team of French archaeologists, led by Gilles Prilot, arrived at Naurs. They were there to conduct a simple survey, just another set of measurements, another routine check. But what they found was nothing less than a second heartbeat for Naurs. As the light from their headlamps swept across the walls, they realized that the faint etchings weren't just medieval musings or idle chatter. They were thousands of names, ranks, battalions, etched into the chalk by the hands of soldiers who had stared down death and found a quiet place to carve their souls. This was no casual graffiti. It was a vast, undocumented war archive, an entire chapter of the Great War hidden in plain sight. Each name a testament to the stubborn refusal of life to vanish without a trace. In that moment, Prilot understood what Naurs truly was. Not just a medieval refuge, but a spiritual annex to the war itself. A sacred vault of voices that had been waiting, silent but patient, for someone to finally hear them again. Word of the discovery spread like a heartbeat, finally freed. Conservation efforts began almost immediately. Teams of historians and volunteers came to work in the tunnels, gently brushing away decades of soot and silence. They cataloged every name, every mark, building a map of memory that stretched across the empire, from Australian sheep farms to English steel towns, from Canadian forests to the hot red plains of the outback. Digital scans captured the labyrinth in exquisite detail, preserving even the faintest scratch of a name for generations yet to come. Scholars wrote papers, military historians pieced together old stories, and genealogists traced family lines through the quiet corridors of chalk. The labyrinth, that had once been a novelty, was reborn as a bridge, a way for the living to reach back and touch the breath of the past. Families came from across oceans, Australians tracing their grandfathers' names in the stone, Canadians finding the echoes of uncles they'd only known in black and white photographs. For some, it was a homecoming they never expected. For others, it was the first time the war became something more than a story in a history book. One woman, tracing her great-uncle's name with trembling fingers, whispered, "He was here." In that moment, the chalky corridor seemed to breathe around her, the names of the lost echoing like a pulse in the dark. But even as the world finally took notice, the silence of those lost decades lingered, a quiet ache for all the years when no one saw, no one listened. For nearly 100 years, those names had waited. The labyrinth had watched the world forget them, watched the careless lights of tourists skip past them like fireflies that never paused long enough to see the stories written in stone. And yet, in that waiting, there was a lesson that Nahors had always carried, a lesson older than the trenches, older than the monks who carved the first altars in the chalk. The lesson is this: memory is patient, memory endures. The names in Naurs are not just echoes of war, they are proof that even in the worst of times, humans reach for the same thing. We reach to be seen, to be remembered. We carve our names into walls, into rings, into the softest part of the earth itself. We do it not out of vanity, but out of hope, because to be remembered is to know that even when the body is dust, the spirit remains. In Naurs, every curve of the tunnel, every scratch in the chalk, every breath of cool air in the dark says the same thing. We were here. We lived. And even now, in the quiet, we are not gone. And so, Naurs stands today, more than just an archaeological site. It is a living document, a testament carved by hands that no longer hold rifles or pens. It is a library of memory, written in the language of chalk and silence. Above the ground, the fields have grown quiet again. The Somme flows slowly, its banks green with life. But below, the labyrinth of Naurs still holds the echo of voices, soldiers and monks, mothers and children, all the quiet generations who found refuge in its cool breath. They are there still, in the white walls and the worn thresholds, in the names that refuse to fade, even after a century of darkness, in the hush that wraps around you when you step inside and the world narrows to the soft beat of your heart. In that hush, you can almost hear it, the laughter of boys who didn't know what waited for them beyond the wire, the prayers of monks who believed that faith could be carved into stone, the small, stubborn promise that no one who carved their name here will ever be truly lost. Naur is not just a place, it is a memory given form, a quiet rebellion against the forgetting. And long after the last visitor has left and the last lamp has flickered out, it will still be there, a city of chalk, a city of names, a city of echoes that refuse to be silenced. In the quiet labyrinth of Naurs, history was not written with ink. It was whispered in chalk, carved into walls by hands that had felt the weight of the world. These were not monuments raised by empires or declarations of kings. They were the final marks of men who wanted to be remembered. They were a message to the future, scrawled in a language older than war, presence. And yet, as the years slipped away, that message was nearly lost, not because it was hidden, but because no one bothered to look. After the end of the Great War, the labyrinth fell silent again. The soldiers had vanished, many forever. Their laughter and curses and fears no longer echoed through the tunnels, replaced by the still breath of chalk and the dust of memory. The names they left behind began to fade beneath layers of soot and moisture. The once vibrant etchings dulled in the damp dark, becoming ghostly echoes of lives lived too quickly. Naurs returned to a kind of sleep. It was no longer a shelter, nor a refuge, nor a place of final thoughts. It became a curiosity, visited now and then by wanderers who saw only the cool stone and not the beating hearts that had shaped it. In the decades that followed, peace itself began to bury Naurs, just as surely as the wars once had. The labyrinth became a backdrop for quaint tourism. In the interwar years, and after the Second World War, visitors wandered the narrow corridors with a sense of detached wonder. Brochures spoke of medieval tunnels and ancient secrets, but they did not speak of the names written there, the final confessions of men who had stared down the end of the world and marked it in chalk. Some of those visitors brushed past the carvings, never seeing them at all. Others saw only scribbles, an idle flourish in a place that felt too old to still be alive. And all the while, the labyrinth itself suffered. New lights were bolted into the walls, burning too hot for the delicate chalk. Careless hands added fresh scratches beside the century-old graffiti, not in malice, but in thoughtless imitation. Footsteps beat a dull rhythm into the ground, and the weight of tourist eyes eroded what no bombshell ever could. The site was alive, but no one was listening. It was a story untold, a prayer unanswered, and so the names slept on beneath the feet of those who had forgotten how to read them. The labyrinth waited, silent, patient, because that is what Naurs was built for. Endurance. It wasn't odd until 2014, almost 100 years after the boys of the Somme had last scratched their names into the walls, that the labyrinth's quiet song was heard again. A French archaeologist, Gilles Prilot, arrived at Naur with a team of researchers. They came not to chase ghosts, but to study the site's medieval bones, its architecture, its shape. They expected ancient prayers, not modern confessions, but as their lights swept across the walls, they saw it, not a handful of careless scratches, but thousands of names, a record of a war written not in history books, but in the fragile skin of chalk. Names, ranks, regiments, dates, each one carved by a hand that had known how to hold a rifle, and, for one quiet moment, a piece of chalk. Prilot and his team realized that Naurs was not merely a medieval curiosity. It was a time capsule, an accidental archive of the Great War. The soft white walls were a ledger of final hopes. Boys from Sydney and Perth, from Manchester and Toronto, who had stood here in the dark and left something of themselves behind. Over 2,000 names were eventually catalogued. Many of them belonged to Australian soldiers, men of the Australian Imperial Force, who had traveled halfway around the world to die in fields they'd never seen on maps. Some of the names were accompanied by regimental badges or kangaroos, scratched out with pride. Others were heartbreakingly simple. A single word, home. A date, July 1916. A name, Tom. This was not just idle vandalism. It was memory, written in the only way they knew how. Each line was a refusal to vanish, a quiet testament to the lives lived in the shadow of death. Prilot called it the largest underground concentration of World War I inscriptions ever found. It wasn't just a few soldiers passing through. It was a river of young men, each leaving behind a mark in the chalk. Some of them never made it home, but here, in the tunnels, they remain. News of the rediscovery spread like wildfire. What had been a footnote became a headline. Researchers from across the world came to Naurs, combing the names, cross-referencing them with military records. Families in Australia, the UK, and Canada received calls they never expected. Did you know your grandfather passed through Naurs? Did you know his name is still there, scratched into the chalk, waiting for you? For some, it was a revelation. The name on a medal in a dusty drawer became a living voice. The story in a faded letter became something you could touch with your fingertips. For others, it was a gentle ache, proof that even if their ancestor never came back, a piece of him had refused to leave. And so, Naurs became not just a site of history, but a bridge. Descendants traveled across oceans to stand in the chalky dark, to trace the letters their ancestors had left. In the silence, they heard laughter or the echo of boots on soft stone. They felt the breath of lives, too often reduced to numbers. Conservation efforts accelerated. The labyrinth was scanned with 3D imaging, each inscription captured in perfect detail to preserve it against the slow creep of time. Lighting was changed, softened to protect the fragile chalk. Interpretive displays were rewritten, no longer telling the story of just medieval monks, but of boys who wrote their names in a war that tried to erase them. Some sections of the labyrinth were closed off, the names sealed behind glass or quiet barriers, not to lock them away, but to keep them safe. Because what lay in Naurs was no longer a curiosity. It was a sacred record, a final breath of men who knew they might never see the sky again. In the end, Naurs was exactly what those boys had made it, a message in the dark, not a monument of glory, but a living whisper. We were here, it says. We mattered. And in that simple defiance, it became something more powerful than any polished memorial. Today, Naurs stands as a testament to the quiet strength of memory. It is no longer just a marvel of medieval engineering, nor a relic of a forgotten war. It is a symbol of what it means to endure, to carve your name into the stone even when the world above is shaking apart. It is a reminder that history does not belong to the loudest voices or the grandest statues. It belongs to those who take a moment in the dark to leave a mark, to say, I was here. In Naurs, that mark still speaks, even when the world above grows silent.